service to London, Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
More on the futures picture coming up as the market tries to get back on some solid footing. Worldwide Exchange is back right after this.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app to see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Redirect and save the Jewelry Exchange Direct.
I use Poshmark to sell all the clothes that I haven't worn in months. I can just hop on the app, take a few pictures, put it up, and start selling in minutes. It feels amazing to have a ton less clutter in my closet and make a little extra money on the side.
Download the free Poshmark app now.
Meeting people is my life. I had to be careful how wide I would open my mouth because I was embarrassed to show my teeth. It was time to do something for myself that was going to be permanent.
The Clear Choice one-day approach is making dental implants a reality for people all over the country who suffer from missing or failing teeth.
I felt like I was the most important person on earth to them.
Bill came in, bad teeth, discomfort, pain. We needed to get him into a smile that he felt confident in. We have expertise that you might not find anywhere else, all in one location.
The next day, I had a new smile. Couldn't wait to show some folks. It's amazing what a smile can do for a person.
Discover why this is so much more than another dental procedure. It's a true life changer. With over 30,000 new smiles and counting, we're lifting spirits and confidence all over America. Schedule your free consultation today. We'll even talk about financing options.
I'm eating corn on the cob. I had the best smile I'd ever had in my life.
Call Clear Choice today.
Told them that if they got me a new chair,
A new kind of investor is changing things up.
I was right. It is
with an app that's changing the way we do money. Download Robinhood now.
Do you have concerns about mild memory loss related to aging? Prevagen is the #1 pharmacist-recommended memory support brand. You can find it in the vitamin aisle in stores everywhere. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
The sell-off spreads. Global markets under pressure after a second day of dramatic losses on Wall Street. And futures suggest another challenging day may be ahead. There's a lot of volatility at play right now. We've seen big losses and so far gains, plus the big corporate story of the morning. Disney announcing a new leader as Bob Iger steps down as chief executive. The second half of Worldwide Exchange starts right now. Welcome back to Worldwide Exchange. I'm Dominic Chu, and today for Brian Sullivan, here's how stock futures are looking halfway through the 5 a.m. Eastern Time hour. Dow futures briefly taking a turn for the worse just around 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time, but you can see here the Dow would open just about flat at this stage. The same thing for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 as well. Now, that's a big story. The reason why, this is all as Wall Street is coming off a historic 2 days of selling within the Dow, down more than 6.5% in just 2 sessions alone. Its worst performance on a percentage basis since February of 2018. On a point basis, however, we are down more than 1,900 points in the past 2 days on the Dow. That's its biggest 2-day point loss in history. Yes, the Dow is much higher now than it was, so mathematically that makes sense. United Health alone has accounted for more than 250 negative Dow points in just the past 2 days alone. That stock you can see there down nearly about 13% since that span on Friday. So United Health, a key focus here. Let's now go global and check in on the market action around the world. We have Matt Taylor in Singapore, also Juliana Tattlebaum in London. And Matt, we're going to start with you.
Hi there again, Dom. We're going to start with the China markets because we did see a fair bit of negativity, particularly in some of the smaller indices. China's down by about 4.3%, but we saw the Shanghai Composite a little bit more contained, off by about 0.8%. Want to focus on Hong Kong, about 0.75% weaker. We did have the budget unveiled earlier with 120 billion Hong Kong dollars, or about 15 billion US dollars in stimulus being pumped into the economy. The bulk of that in cash handouts, 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, about 1,200 US dollars to all permanent Hong Kong residents to try and kickstart the economy in the wake of coronavirus and also the protests that we've seen in Hong Kong. Broadly across the rest of Asia, it was a negative session. The laggard today are the Australian and New Zealand markets. New Zealand off by about 1.5%. Australia, the worst performer, down by about 2.3%. We're watching South Korea off by about 1%. Tomorrow, though, we are expecting the Bank of Korea to cut interest rates by 25 basis points to a record low. Dom, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Matt Taylor, for that. Juliana Tattlebaum now joins us live from London with the early trade in Europe. Juliana.
Dom, European stocks are sliding for a fifth straight session this morning, but we have bounced off the lows. The underperformer this morning is the German DAX. This is the main benchmark in Germany. That market is off about 1.5%. But Italy, the epicenter of the outbreak outside of the Asian region, is seeing some flattening in terms of stocks there. The FTSE MIB, the main benchmark for Italy, is currently trading about 0.02% lower, but really teetering around the flat line after selling off more steeply earlier this week. But the outbreak continues to worsen in Italy, so investors very firmly focused on that region. Let me take you to the sectors, though, because I think the most interesting part of today's trading session is travel and leisure. Travel and leisure is down about 3.2%. Airlines getting hit particularly hard. And now this morning we heard from Germany's largest airliner, Lufthansa. They are taking some pretty drastic measures to try to counter the negative impact of coronavirus, and that is weighing on the broader airline sector. But here, as you can see, every sector trading in the red here in Europe. Dom?
All right, Juliana Tattlebaum live in London with the European trade. Thank you very much. Investors now digging through the rubble after 2 days of intense selling across the world. 8 of 11 S&P 500 sectors are now negative for the year as fears of a growing coronavirus pandemic ripple across Wall Street. Among those sectors, 52% of all tech companies in the S&P 500
cuts. And I think as we saw even yesterday from Clarida, that that decision is a hard one for the Fed to make. It's hard for monetary policy to react to a challenge like this, and so that is, I think, something that markets are clearly expecting a lot more action from, but is clearly a risk if central banks are not able to move as quickly as markets would like them to.
So, what's an investor to do?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, to look at. I think that you have seen, as you mentioned at the very beginning, stocks have corrected significantly. In many cases, you're back to levels from early November and early October. So I think in a big picture sense, that's certainly a good thing. I think as we look kind of across the piece of asset classes, we're probably most concerned about something like high yield credit, where you're very exposed if global growth continues to get worse, but you lack the appreciation if policy stimulus kicks in. And then an asset class we think is oversold here are financials in Europe, where we actually think the profitability trends, the earnings trends in fourth quarter were pretty good. They've obviously been caught up in all of this volatility, but we think under the surface those businesses are doing better.
Andrew, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Andrew Sheets, Morgan Stanley Chief Cross Asset Strategist this morning. It is now 5:52 on Wall Street. Nathan.
All right, John, thanks. Let's turn to our other top story of the morning. Of course, last night's Palmetto debate in South Carolina, hosted by CBS and heard here on Bloomberg Radio. Electability was a major theme for the 7 Democrats vying for the nomination on the Charleston stage.
Of the last 50 polls that have been done nationally, Mr. Bloomberg, I beat Trump 47 of those 50 times.
I'm the one choice that makes some sense. I have the experience, I have the resources, and I have the record.
At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, kill it, the way that Mayor Bloomberg
never said that.
Bernie voted 5 times against the Brady bill.
There's 7 white people on this stage talking about racial justice.
We're either going to support someone who's a democratic socialist or somebody who has a long history of being a Republican.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
For Morning After Reaction, we turn now to Greg Vallier, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. And I wonder, Greg, if those last 2 comments from Steyer and Klobuchar don't encapsulate the choice that Democrats are facing right now.
Yeah, I think so, Nathan. Good morning. It's a very difficult choice. I thought last night was the equivalent of professional wrestling in terms of the quality of the discourse. But I do think there was one significant story to emerge last night, and that is Joe Biden still has a pulse rate. He did pretty well. He showed real vigor, and I think that while he's got a long way to go, it's still a little too early to count him out.
Is it too early to count him out in terms of Super Tuesday and the contest to come? I think there is some expectation that he's going to do well in the South Carolina primary. Will that be enough for him?
Well, you're right. First of all, there'll be the South Carolina primary on Saturday. I think Biden will win. The endorsement from James Clyburn, the powerful House member from South Carolina, will help. But then we got right away Super Tuesday, and I think there Bernie is the favorite to win in California. Biden really needs to win Texas. If he wins there, 2 or 3 other states, if it's viewed as roughly a tie, we're in for a long, long journey here of several months. But I think Biden could pull it off. I do think that the chances that Bernie would have a majority of delegates is no better than 50-50.
Is there enough support for Biden potentially to counter Michael Bloomberg with his resources and now the more than $500 million he spent on advertising?
Yeah, money's a big factor, isn't it? And I think for some of the Democrats, Klobuchar, Joe Biden, a couple of others, money is becoming a real problem. They won't get their message out quite as well. That still is a reason to say it's not absolutely certain that Bloomberg is finished. He's got resources, but once again, he did not have a great debate.
Did he do enough, though, to bounce back from his first debate in Las Vegas?
Well, first of all, Mike Bloomberg has to stop telling jokes. That's not one of his strong suits, and most of his jokes fell flat. But I thought on policy he was quite good. He did a very good job there. He will be in the mix on Super Tuesday and beyond, but you still have to say after last night that Bernie came in as the favorite and he left as the favorite.
So what's the difficulty now for Democrats as they potentially face, Bernie Sanders, who is the front runner right now, against Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, potential fight for that so-called center lane?
It's going to be difficult. Somebody will emerge, I would certainly think, and it's probably Biden, maybe Bloomberg. But there's one other factor. When you talk about who can beat Trump, I'm not sure any of these candidates can beat Trump, but there's one thing out there that Trump has to really worry about, and that's the coronavirus. The White House yesterday, the entire administration was incoherent, inconsistent in their message, and they got to get their act together really quick on this.
Just real quickly, were you surprised that there wasn't more attention on the coronavirus at the debate last night?
Absolutely. Talking about charter schools, there's some peripheral issues. I thought the coronavirus, I think it is the biggest story in the world today. They didn't spend enough time on it, and I think maybe to their own peril. Again, Trump has to worry about this issue.
Again, Greg Valliere, always good speaking with you, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. And we should mention Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, parent company of Bloomberg Radio. The coronavirus certainly seems to have the attention of markets as the global sell-off continues. S&P futures down 10 points. Dow futures down 155, pairing earlier losses as low as 425 points lower on the session overnight. And NASDAQ futures are lower by 37 points. Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Oh.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, February 26, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Risk-off sentiment takes hold as fears over the coronavirus grip global markets.
The CDC warns Americans to prepare for a further spread of the outbreak.
Infections increase in South Korea while South America reports its first potential case.
It was a brawling Democratic debate in South Carolina, plus jurors in the Roger Stone case say there was no bias in his conviction. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Yankees will not have Luis Severino for all of 2020. He's headed for Tommy John surgery. Red Hot Rangers beat the Islanders in overtime. The Devils won in Detroit.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by IBKR, the professional's gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at ibkr.com.
Global stocks are falling on fresh fears from the coronavirus outbreak. It is 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are down 12 points. Dow futures down 165. NASDAQ futures down 45. The DAX in Germany is down 2.1%. CAC in Paris down 1.6%, and the FTSE 100 down 1.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 0.8%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.7%. 10-year Treasury, little change. Yield 1.35%. Yield on the 2-year 1.17%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.2% or 59 cents at $49.32 a barrel. COMEX gold little changed, up 80 cents at $16.50.80 an ounce. Nathan.
All right, Karen, thank you. We begin with the latest developments on the coronavirus this morning. The Centers for Disease Control is now warning Americans to prepare for an outbreak.
Current global circumstances suggest it's likely that this virus will cause a pandemic.
Now, so far, the U.S. does have just a small number of cases, but CDC Deputy Director Ann Schuchat says they're preparing for a wider spread of the virus.
Now, it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will become infected and how many of those will develop severe or more complicated disease.
In the most drastic scenario, officials would close schools and cancel large public gatherings like sporting events and business conferences.
Those precautions are already underway in parts of the world as the virus goes global. For the latest on the spread, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. South Korea has seen infections surge to more than 1,200. Italy's reporting 19 more cases. Iran has 44 new infections. And 700 people are currently confined to a hotel in Spain. The spread is stoking concern about keeping the virus out of the U.S. Dr. Stanley Pecos is a professor of immunology at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health.
Pretty soon it's going to become too large of an issue for us to deal with respect to our screening, and things are just going to be entering the country despite the best efforts that we have to try to screen and test for individuals who are positive for the virus.
Meantime, a patient in Brazil has tested positive in a preliminary test for the disease. That would be the first infection in Latin America. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. The financial fallout from the outbreak continues worldwide, with stocks in Asia falling for their fifth straight session. Joining us now with details is Bloomberg's Juliet Sally in Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The won fell to its weakest level since 2016 after South Korea reported a further escalation in coronavirus cases. However, benchmark stock indexes in Seoul, Hong Kong and Tokyo came off their session lows. The Nikkei 225 closed down 0.8%. Hong Kong's government announced a $15.4 billion stimulus package as the city struggles to stabilize its economy that's been doubly hit by the virus and months of political unrest. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thank you. Meantime, in Europe, stocks are tumbling again today, and Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us live from London with the very latest. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. A fifth day in the red. European equities lower right across the region, with the Stoxx 600 now trading at levels not seen since October. All 19 industry groups selling off, with travel and leisure stocks the worst hit, down 3.8%. And more warnings from the corporate world. The company behind Evian Water, Danone, says that first quarter sales will grind to a halt. And Diageo, the maker of Johnnie Walker whiskey, says that coronavirus will wipe out over $400 million from sales this year. Europe Stoxx 600 currently down 1.8%. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ewan, thank you. Back here in the U.S., we're seeing shares of Walt Disney down nearly 2% in early trading. That's after Bob Iger announced he's stepping down as CEO. Bob Chapek will take the reins at Disney after 27 years' experience running the company's theme park, consumer, and home video divisions. Iger will stay on as executive chairman through next year.
And we'll have more on markets and the virus impact throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. First, we turn to politics and last night's Democratic presidential debate, where Bernie Sanders felt the heat that comes with frontrunner status.
I like Bernie. We came in together to the Senate, but I do not think that this is the best person to lead the ticket.
I dug in, I did the work, and then Bernie's team trashed me for it.
Bernie, in fact, hasn't passed much of anything.
Not only is this a way to get Donald Trump reelected, we got a House to worry about. We got a Senate to worry about.
Vladimir Putin thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected, so you'll lose to him.
Michael Bloomberg cited reports Russia wants Sanders to win the nomination. The senator responded,
"Hey, Mr. Putin, if I'm president of the United States, trust me, you're not going to interfere in any more American elections."
Meantime, Michael Bloomberg fielded attacks from Elizabeth Warren, who once again hit the former mayor over non-disclosure agreements signed by women at his company.
Sign a blanket release and let those women speak out so that they can tell their stories the way I can tell my story.
We released these women from the non-disclosure agreement. I did that 2 days later, and my company has said we will not use non-disclosure agreements ever again. The senator has got it, and I don't know what else she wants us to do.
I'll be
We're
clear.
following exactly what she asked
I'll
to
tell
do.
you exactly
and the
what I
trouble
want you to
is,
do.
with this senator, enough is never enough.
And we should mention that Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP. That is the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Candidates did, in fact, discuss policy as well at last night's debate. We'll have more on that in a second, plus full analysis throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Daybreak. A morning pointing to more losses on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg. And at 6:07 on Wall Street, we have more on the debate and the latest world and national news brought to you by Land Rover. The Own the Adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. During the debate on CBS and heard on Bloomberg Radio, Senator Bernie Sanders criticized the way President Donald Trump is handling the coronavirus epidemic.
In the White House today, we have a self-described great genius. Self-described. And this great genius has told us that this coronavirus is going to end in 2 months. April is the magical day that this great scientist we have in the White House has determined. I wish I was kidding. That is what he said.
Senator Elizabeth Warren is taking aim at Senator Bernie Sanders over his single-payer health care plan.
Bernie and I both want to see universal health care, but Bernie's plan doesn't explain how to get there, doesn't show how we're going to get enough allies into it, and doesn't show enough about how we're going to pay for it.
While many of the candidates agree that marijuana possession should no longer be a crime, former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg said that he does not think it should be completely legal.
You should listen to the scientists and the doctors. They say go very slowly. They haven't done enough research, and the evidence so far is worrisome before we get all our kids, particularly kids in their late teens, and boys even more than girls, who this may be damaging their brains. Until we know the science, it's just nonsensical to push ahead.
We should mention Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. 3 of the jurors who convicted Republican operative Roger Stone for lying to Congress and witness tampering testified that political bias played no role in their decision, pushing back against Stone's contention that he deserves a new trial. U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson did not issue a ruling at the end of yesterday's hearing on Stone's request. Governor Phil Murphy's third shot at a higher tax for New Jersey millionaires may be the charm. The first-term Democrat proposed a record $40.9 billion budget with a tax boost for the rich to help underpin unprecedented spending on New Jersey transit, pensions, and schools. His odds are far better this year, with Senate President Stephen Sweeney saying he'd consider the levy if the governor would consider an even bigger than planned pension payment. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Coming up to 6:10 on Wall Street, Michael. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashower.
Nathan, the Yankees enjoyed a very successful 2019 season despite a ton of injuries. Over 30 players went on the injured list. The hope was for better luck in 2020. Not the case already. James Paxton's out, so is Aaron Judge, and Luis Severino, injured almost all of last season, will not pitch at all this year. He's headed for Tommy John surgery. The Yankee GM is Brian Cashman.
Sevy is
acknowledged and agreed that the surgery is necessary. His plan is to have it done as soon as possible, and he's obviously contemplating who to do it with, and so he's still working through the process of finding the availability of the doctor's time frames and choosing which doctor to utilize, and I'll get you that when he makes that final decision on his end.
Yankees do have pitching depth that will now be tested. What a win for the Red Hot Rangers at the Islanders. Blue Shirts led 3-1 third period. Isles tied it. A Brock Nelson goal. 18 seconds left. Then opening minute of the 3-on-3 overtime. Artemi Panarin with a steal and a pass to Mika Zibanejad. His blast, the game-winning goal. 4-3 victory makes it 8 wins in the Rangers' last 9. An 8-game road winning streak, longest in the long history of the franchise. They are not a playoff team now, but they're getting closer. 5 points now behind the Islanders. Devils won 4-1 at Detroit. Corey Schneider, who's been in the minors, got his first win of the season in goal. NBA Lakers beat the Pelicans. LeBron James scored 40, 50th win of the season for the Milwaukee Bucks. College hoops, Wake Forest upset Duke in double overtime. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. As we continue to watch the global market sell-off, S&P futures are lower by 7 points. Dow futures, which had been down as much as 425 points, are lower now by 115. NASDAQ futures lower by 20 points. We will have more on the market reaction to coronavirus. Dennis Gartman, former publisher of the Gartman Letter, will be with us shortly. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who sees change to launch.
Not in my 20 years of being a newsagent have I seen my shop so buzzing. And it's all because it's a double rollover tonight. I've even set some confetti off to celebrate. Our customers can't get enough of it. So come on, don't miss it.
Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over. Discover Ireland's Wild Atlantic Way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn.
First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Paul Allen.
Joining me now is Oil Search Managing Director Karen Wolf. Your major project in Papua New Guinea, the Pyongyang joint venture. Are you confident that that expansion can get back on track? And what sort of discussions are you having around that?
Look, it's a good question. At the end of January, you'd be aware that the discussions or the formal negotiations were suspended, given the fact that there was a deadline for those negotiations to be completed. The important point there is that, informal discussions are still going on. The value of Pyongyang in an integrated sense for all parties, so it's an integrated three-train project, is a serious amount of value and benefits for all parties, and especially the Papua New Guinea government. So by not having a deadline now, it allows some time to have some informal discussions and really try to bridge the gap between the expectations of the parties. And at Oil Search, we're confident that gap can be bridged.
Do you get a sense that maybe the Exxon-led side might be prepared to make a few concessions?
Look, I think it's a matter of really understanding and listening to the key issues from both parties to make sure that there's a mutually acceptable arrangement for these projects. There's a 40-year, 30-plus, 40-year-plus projects, and we need to make sure that the government is totally satisfied with the benefit distributions.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks are dropping along with U.S. stock index futures as investors continue to fret the widening outbreak of coronavirus cases globally. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 3 points. Dow futures down 78. NASDAQ futures down about 2. The DAX in Germany's down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32. Yield 1.35%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.18%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1% or 49 cents at $49.41 a barrel, and COMEX gold little change up 90 cents at $16.50.90 an ounce. The euro 1.0884 against the dollar. The yen 110.42. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the first U.S. military soldier tested positive for coronavirus. His infection and many others are connected to a southeastern city in South Korea, Daegu, where the government has been mobilizing to contain the virus. South Korea has seen infections surge to more than 1,200. Italy's reporting 19 more cases. Iran has 44 new infections. And 700 people are currently confined to a hotel in Spain. Meantime, a patient in Brazil has tested positive in a preliminary test for the disease. That would be the first infection in Latin America. Frontrunner Bernie Sanders caught the brunt of attacks in last night's Democratic presidential debate. All 6 of his rivals delivered punches aimed at stalling his momentum ahead of Super Tuesday. In the NHL, the Rangers beat the Islanders in overtime. The Devils won along with the Capitals. The Bruins lost. In the NBA, the Celtics won. The Warriors lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John.
Michael, thank you. Coming up on 6:20 on Wall Street, we're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. A day after the S&P 500 fell 3% to cap its worst two-day slide since 2015. Futures this morning point to more losses. Well, it's time like these when we call on expertise and experience. And at that intersection, we find economist Dennis Gartman this morning. Dennis, good morning. What's your view of the stock sell-off?
It's obviously very severe. That has been very severe. I think people are underestimating how severe it has been. We're down almost 9% from the high in the Dow, a little over 10% from the high to the interim low in the S&P. And I'm afraid that rallies are to be sold into, not weakness to be bought. I'm amused or dismayed at how many people are still willing to buy the dip, and I think this dip is far more serious than people want to anticipate at this point. So I trade only for my own account although I am the chairman of one university's endowment and on the board of directors of another, and have was active last week appealing to our outside investment officers to be less involved in the stock market. Trading for my own account, I'm short of the stock market, I'm long of bonds, and I'm long of gold, and I intend to stay that way.
Does the sell-off in the coronavirus epidemic at this point, does it mask other concerns about the global economy?
Clearly, the global virus, the virus circumstances is a real catalyst for what's going on. But we had stock prices at, I've used the term egregious, and I'll continue to use that, egregiously overbought territory. Price to earnings multiples, price to GDP, price to sales were at historically wide levels. And I think that the coronavirus circumstance has really done damage to the global trade events. I mean, I live 15 miles from the Norfolk International Terminal here, the export terminal, and you can see that things are backing up. Ships are not moving. If it's happening in Norfolk, it's happening in Los Angeles and Long Beach. It's happening in New York. It's happening in Asia. So this is not just a one-off circumstance. I think this is serious. I think we should pay attention.
The number's pretty incredible, Dennis. I'm talking about treasuries. 1.18% of the 2-year this morning. 2 hikes are priced in from the Fed now, maybe a third. What's more liquidity going to do?
Well, clearly, it's not just the Fed that's becoming expansionary. It's the ECB is expansionary. The Bank of Japan is expansionary. The People's Bank of China is expansionary. And those expansionary policies are extant and have to continue for quite some period of time. So the trend in the yields around the world have been from the upper left to the lower right and will continue to be so. So the fact that we're at 1.18, I think we're going to go under 1% before not too long. Money moves to the United States because we're still the only place that has a positive yield, and that's probably going to continue. So yields have been moving down. They're going to continue to move down, and we're going to take the long bond under 1.5, and we're going to take the 10-year under 1. Well, we're down to 180 or so, or 185 on the 10-year. It's going to go lower still. There's no reason to think that yields are going to do anything other than continue to decline.
That's remarkable. You know, the pale horse of the apocalypse had a favorite commodity, certainly would be gold. Your call on that has been prescient. Do you add to that position?
I think on any breaks you do, and I think yesterday afternoon there was an attack upon the gold market, which made no sense. So, yes, I think you buy weakness in gold. Not only that, I think you buy sideways movements in gold, and I think you buy even strength in the gold market. I've been bullish on gold, especially in terms of non-U.S. dollar terms, and I'll continue to hold to that. That I think is the trade of the year. So I think you want to be long of the gold market, short of the stock market, and long of the bond market. And I think that's the trade to have. I have it in my own account, and I continue to recommend it.
As always, thanks, Dennis, for your perspective. Appreciate it. Dennis Gartman, economist, and it is now 6:23 on Wall Street. Nathan.
Okay, John, thanks a lot. We are also keeping on top of our other top story of the morning, the rowdy Democratic presidential debate last night in South Carolina, hosted by CBS News, heard here on Bloomberg Radio. 2 candidates in particular faced the brunt of attacks, frontrunner Bernie Sanders and top ad spender Michael Bloomberg.
Mayor Bloomberg has a solid and strong and enthusiastic base of support. Problem is, they're all billionaires.
Vladimir Putin thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected, so you'll lose to him.
I will win the African-American vote here in South Carolina.
Donald Trump with his nostalgia for the social order of the 1950s, and Bernie Sanders with the nostalgia for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
Bernie and I agree on a lot of things, but I think I would make a better president.
I am the only one in the New Hampshire debate when asked if we had a problem with the socialists leading the ticket that raised my hand.
Bernie Sanders' analysis is right. The difference is I don't like his solutions.
Let's get more now live from Charleston. Bloomberg Radio and Television Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli is with us this morning after the debate. What are some of your key takeaways from the Palmetto debate, Kevin?
Good morning, Nathan. I'm not sure. My big takeaway is that I'm not sure anything in terms of the dynamics of the race heading into this weekend's South Carolina primary change. And in fact, I think Senator Bernie Sanders still poised to have a significant wins on Super Tuesday, though not anything that would get him immediately to the 1,991 delegates that are needed to officially clinch the nomination. The second point that I would make is that for former Vice President Joe Biden, it was amongst his campaign officials one of his strongest debates showing he is poised to win South Carolina's contest this weekend, fueled by support amongst the African American community. And so they're hoping that would be a launch pad, as some of his surrogates referred to it in the spin room, heading into Super Tuesday.
Let's hear from one of the surrogates you spoke to in the spin room, including Congressman Cedric Richmond of California. He is the co-chairman of Joe Biden's campaign. For him and for Biden, it is all about this Saturday's contest in South Carolina. So let's hear what he had to say.
Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. South Carolina launched both of them to the presidency. And we are looking forward. We're looking to get launched on Saturday night. And I think that it'll be a repeat of history in terms of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama.
Well, that is the big question, isn't it, Kevin, whether South Carolina can serve as a launch pad heading into Super Tuesday so close after that primary this weekend.
Precisely. And even beyond that, I think if you're waking up this morning and trying to piece together the dynamics and the trajectory of where this thing heads, I would expect, based upon my reporting, that there are going to be several candidates who drop out of the race within the next week and a half. You're hearing that whispers that's the expectation amongst the other front-runner campaigns. And then from there, that's when I think Biden is really hoping to catch fire, is when other candidates start to drop out. But heading out of Super Tuesday, which is just 1 week from today, the Sanders campaign is going to be trying to project strength and trying to project a ton of momentum coming out of Super Tuesday, especially if they win the prized possession of the night, which is California.
Is there a sense from the campaigns that Sanders projected that kind of strength last night during the debate?
There is, and I think that's a really great question, because it's unlikely, anything could happen, obviously, but it's unlikely that any candidate get 1,991 delegates. But if one candidate, such as a Sanders, gets close to that or gets a plurality of that, that's when it could get really interesting in terms of how the convention goes and when the process ends. But for Vice President Joe Biden, he's got to have some points on the board, so to speak, and they're hopeful that will start this weekend right here where I am in South Carolina.
And it's going to get interesting, I got to think, among the Democratic establishment, because you hear a lot of concern from them that if Bernie Sanders does become their nominee, that's going to have a very negative effect on down-ballot races and their hold on Congress in 2020.
So it is, and I think in talking with people who support Senator Bernie Sanders, what they say is that one of the things that you're going to start hearing over the next week and a half is that Sanders is really going to start hitting home this point that he believes he would be able to bring in new voters to the party and expand the base of the Democratic Party, bolstered by support by younger turnout, as well as voters who have been disenfranchised from the Democratic Party as a whole over the last several cycles. Candidly, it's very similar to the criticism that was lodged against candidate Donald Trump and also what his campaign did, which was to say that he would bring in new voters and new voters to the Republican Party last cycle. So it's fascinating, really, to watch that populist approach now play out last cycle on the right and this cycle on the left.
In our last minute here, Kevin, obviously Joe Biden's campaign is hoping that South Carolina will be that springboard, but Michael Bloomberg and his resources stand in the way. What is the Bloomberg factor?
Well, I mean, his campaign has said, Nathan, that they want to have a strong showing on Super Tuesday to fuel them. Quite frankly, it doesn't look like they're poised to have a solid night on Super Tuesday. It's a week from now. That's an eternity in politics. However, there are a handful of other contests about 2 weeks after Super Tuesday that, from their thinking, if the field winnows, that maybe they would be able to get more eyeballs on him and that he would be able to pick up a contest like that and again start to collect delegates.
Bloomberg Radio and Television Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli with us from Charleston this morning after the Palmetto debate. And a reminder that Michael Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio, is running for the Democratic presidential nomination. And you can follow all the latest on the race to the Democratic convention in Milwaukee, ELEC Go, on the Bloomberg terminal. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:30 on Wall Street. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and we're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks in Europe and Asia are lower, but U.S. futures are turning around. Dow futures have been down more than 400 points at one point after the Centers for Disease Control warned Americans to prepare for an outbreak of the coronavirus.
Now, it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen.
So far, the U.S. has just a small number of cases as the virus continues to spread worldwide. For the very latest, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And Nathan, South Korea has seen infections surge to more than 1,200. Italy is reporting 19 more cases. Iran has 44 new infections, and 700 people are currently confined to a hotel in Spain. Meantime, a patient in Brazil has tested positive in a preliminary test for the disease. That would be the first infection in Latin America. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. And global stocks are lower, but off their worst levels of this session. Europe Stock 600 is down 1.1% right now. U.S. futures, again, have turned higher. They're up 0.1%. Michael Metcalf is head of macro strategy at State Street.
Gauging the size of the slowdown is uncertain, but we know there's going to be a significant slowdown. Central banks kind of saved us from the trade war. It's less clear that central banks can save the markets this time around, I would say.
And Fed Fund futures currently imply 2.5 rate cuts from the Fed this year. Bloomberg customers can access the data by typing WIRP GO on their terminal.
Well, meantime, in corporate news, we're seeing shares of Walt Disney down about 2% in early trading. That's after Bob Iger announced he is stepping down as Disney CEO. He'll be replaced by 27-year company veteran Bob Chapek. We spoke with Iger about the move.
In Bob Chapek, we have someone that not only knows the company very well, having run a few of our really important businesses, including Parks and Resorts, but we couldn't think of a better candidate to take over the company at this time.
Chapek takes the reins at Disney effective immediately. Iger will stay on as executive chairman through next year.
And futures this morning, as we said, are moving higher. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg, with S&P futures now up about 5 points. Dow futures, little change. They're up 3. And NASDAQ futures up 22. The DAX in Germany is down 1.2%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32. Yield 1.36%. The yield on the 2-year 1.19%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.8% or 42 cents at $49.47 a barrel. And COMEX gold is little changed at $16.50 an ounce. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks. 6:33 on Wall Street, and this news update is brought to you by Land Rover. The Own the Adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Bernie Sanders felt the burden of his front-runner status in the Democratic presidential race as all 6 of his rivals delivered an onslaught of attacks at last night's debate. During the debate on CBS and heard on Bloomberg Radio, Sanders explained his stance on gun safety and the NRA.
Because of all these disgusting and horrific mass shootings, the American people now understand that we must be aggressive on gun safety, not be dictated to by the NRA. And I am proud that I have a D- voting record from the NRA. If elected president, it will get worse than that.
Elizabeth Warren accused Sanders of stealing details of her health care plan. Former Vice President Joe Biden talked about Russia interfering with the U.S. election process.
We, in fact, should be imposing sanctions on Russia now for their interference.
Michael Bloomberg said Russia's intelligence services favor Senator Sanders because Vladimir Putin wants President Donald Trump to be reelected. We should mention Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. 3 of the jurors who convicted Republican operative Roger Stone for lying to Congress and witness tampering testified that political bias played no role in their decision, pushing back against Stone's contention that he deserves a new trial. Senate Democrats have blocked a pair of Republican bills that would ban most late-term abortions. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says this is just fake and dishonest and a sideshow.
But they're putting them on the floor anyway to pander to the hard right and to cover up the fact that they won't provide good health care for women.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he can't understand the hot debate.
It almost defies belief that an entire political party could find cause to object to this basic protection for babies.
The measures have been defeated multiple times in the past few years. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
White supremacist and mass murderer Dylan Roof apparently staged a recent hunger strike. According to the Associated Press, Roof detailed his protest in a series of letters alleging he was being targeted by prison staff, verbally harassed and abused. The 25-year-old Roof is on death row in a Terre Haute, Indiana prison for killing 9 black church members during a Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. For just before 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashauer.
Nathan, a couple years ago, Luis Severino was the Yankee ace after 2 straight All-Star seasons. He was third of the Cy Young voting in 2017, a 19-game winner the following campaign. But Severino was injured almost all of last season, and his 2020 season is over before it begins, headed for Tommy John surgery to replace a partially torn ligament in his elbow that was not detected during several off-season exams. In the near 100-year history of the Rangers, they have never had a road winning streak like this. 8 in a row, the 8th coming last night. Overtime at the Islanders.
Taken away by Panarin. Panarin breaks toward the net. He's double-teamed, and it's knocked away. Jimenez. He scores! The Rangers win!
Rose and MSG thriller at the Coliseum. Rangers led 3-1 third period. Islanders tied it. A Brock Nelson goal with just 18 seconds left. Seconds into OT. Zibanejad from Panarin. 4-3 Rangers, who have won 8 of 9 overall, getting closer. The Devils won 4-1 at Detroit. Looks like labor peace in the NFL. Owners had already given their approval. Now the player reps have as well, so it goes to a vote of the full union. It's expected to pass, and the NFL will move to a 17-game regular season in 2021. Giants GM Dave Gettleman says they are, quote, open for business if the team wants to trade up for the Giants' 4th overall pick of the upcoming draft. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
Thank you, John. It's 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
How low can bond yields go? No record is safe. I'm Brian Chapata, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. At this point, the question is no longer why are U.S. yields this low, but rather how low can yields go? The benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury yield set a record this week, dropping below the previous record of 1.318%. Make no mistake, the news about the coronavirus is bad. It's killed more than 2,600 people so far and infected about 80,000. Italy's financial hub, Milan, is in virtual lockdown. The CDC has told Americans to prepare for significant disruptions to daily life if the coronavirus outbreak begins to spread locally. Obviously, the thesis that governments across the world had the virus under control didn't hold up. Now comes the hard part, what to do about it. Some strategists are advocating a balanced approach. Sell some treasuries if you want, but keep your core position intact. With so much still unknown about the coronavirus, that seems like the right move. And with that sort of persistent demand, no record low yield level is safe. I'm Brian Chapata. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
Your Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It's 6:38 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
Call it freeze-dried electricity, or maybe energy on ice. I think frigid air is already taken. And it's actually not just frigid air. This cryogenic process turns air so cold it liquefies. The Tokyo-based industrial machinery giant Sumitomo Heavy Industries sees a future in using super cold air as a way of storing electricity. Sumitomo is investing $46 million in Highview Power, which stores electricity by cooling air to minus 321 Fahrenheit and then powering turbines with it as it warms and expands. The investment gives Sumitomo a 14% stake in closely held Highview, valuing it at about $330 million. Highview's technology is among several techniques emerging to store electricity on a scale big enough to help utilities move toward using wind and solar power around the clock. The challenge is Highview's systems haven't have been tested on a mass scale, making them difficult to finance. Backing from Sumitomo may help ease that. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Reports. I'm Bob Moon.
Okay, Bob, thank you. Now some other stories we're following this morning. Salesforce.com is losing the co-CEO who revamped its growth strategy. Keith Block has stepped down. Block received less attention than founder Mark Benioff, but in his 7 years at the company, sales increased fourfold. Meanwhile, Salesforce reported revenue rose 35% in the latest quarter. And Virgin Galactic has resumed taking deposits for future trips into space. Richard Branson's company is trying to maintain momentum toward commercial service. That's despite growing losses. Virgin isn't saying how many seats it will offer or what they'll cost. Futures have turned higher now, with S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures higher by 27 points, NASDAQ futures a gain of about 36 points. The European shares continue their move lower. The 10-year's down 5/30 seconds, yields up to 1.36% now. 2-year Treasury yield 1.19%. More post-debate analysis to come with Wendy Schiller of Brown University. Stay with us. This is Daybreak.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Although the Geneva Motor Show isn't starting for a week, Volvo got ahead of the game by unveiling the Polestar Precept concept. Renderings of the four-door fully electric luxury concept car reveal an all-glass roof extending down to the tailgate and a low, sleek silhouette that looks like a cross between a sport wagon and a large touring sedan, quite possibly a contender to the front-running Porsche Taycan and Tesla Model S. Inside the Precept, it's all about sustainability. Bye-bye wood, leather, and chrome. Hello seat surfaces knitted from recycled bottles. Headrests made from cork. Carpets reclaimed from fishing nets. Pennsylvania's Allentown Art Museum just discovered that a painting they sent off for cleaning is an actual Rembrandt with a potential multi-million-dollar valuation on the line. Old Masters art dealers caution that these Antiques Roadshow-like reappraisals happen all the time. Just look at the $450 million Leonardo for proof. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
A 12th person has died in northern Italy of coronavirus, with confirmed cases shooting up there. In hard-hit North Korea, a member of the American military is under quarantine, infected with COVID-19. All this hitting global stock markets hard. Christine Roman's watching the boards for us.
Futures are down, but look, you can see that Europe and Asia both lower here, trying to find their footing and unable to do so. Looking at futures right now in the United States, U.S. stock index futures still lower here.
Down about 0.5% across the boards. Moderate to heavy snowfall in the forecast today from Illinois into parts of Indiana, southern Michigan, and northwestern Ohio. As the storm moves east, meteorologist Padram Javahari says places like upstate New York could see up to 20 inches of snow.
The piece of good news out of this is it's going to be a very short-lived, quick duration event here for portions of the Midwest. That includes St. Louis on into, say, Chicago, working way towards the east around Cleveland, even some snow showers pushing in. And really, you've got to get to the eastern Great Lakes to pick up the highest accumulations.
I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 6:47 on Wall Street, and futures not only reversed their decline, they are adding to their gains. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures have been extremely volatile thus far, with the Dow futures now up 37 points. We're down 425 early on. S&P futures up 9 and NASDAQ futures climbed by 40. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.37%. Gold is trading higher by 12. And Shanghai fell 0.8% overnight. While in Europe, only Italy is trading higher. Germany is down 1%. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, new home sales. After the bell last night, Disney named the Parks chief to succeed Iger as CEO. And Salesforce boosted 2021 revenue forecasts. Regarding earnings this morning, Lowe's quarterly sales missed estimate. Shares are down 3% in the pre-market. And wrapping things up, Nike was cut to hold over at HSBC. Toll Brothers cut to market perform at Raymond James. And D.R. Horton and KB Home both cut to hold over at SunTrust. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And again, S&P futures are up 11 points now. Dow futures up 51. NASDAQ futures up 44. The DAX in Germany is down 0.9%, and the CAC in Paris and FTSE 100 both down about 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 5/30 seconds, yield 1.37%. The yield on the 2-year, 1.19%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.8% or 42 cents at $49.49 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 0.1% on $1.60 to $16.4840 an ounce. The euro 1.0876 against the dollar. British pound 1.2940, and the yen at 110.56. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the first U.S. military soldier tested positive for the coronavirus. His infection is connected to the South Korean city of Daegu, where the government has been mobilizing to contain the virus. South Korea has seen infections surge to more than 1,200. Italy's reporting 19 more cases. Iran has 44 new infections, and 700 people are currently confined to a hotel in Spain. Meanwhile, there's the first infection of coronavirus in Latin America. A patient in Brazil has tested positive in a preliminary test. Democratic presidential hopefuls met on stage for the 10th time at last night's debate in Charleston, South Carolina, for what turned out to be a wild and raucous event ahead of Super Tuesday. In the NHL, the Rangers beat the Islanders in overtime. The Devils won along with the Capitals. The Bruins lost. NBA action, the Celtics won, the Warriors lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. We're at 6:50 on Wall Street. Let's get more now on last night's Palmetto debate in Charleston, South Carolina, hosted by CBS News, heard here on Bloomberg Radio. Electability emerged as a major theme for the 7 Democrats on that Charleston stage.
Of the last 50 polls that have been done nationally, Mr. Bloomberg, I beat Trump 47 of those 50 times.
I'm the one choice that makes some sense. I have the experience, I have the resources, and I have the record.
At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, kill it, the way that Mayor Bloomberg
never said that.
Bernie voted 5 times against the Brady bill.
There's 7 white people on this stage talking about racial justice.
We're either going to support someone who's a democratic socialist or somebody who has a long history of being a Republican.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
And we're joined now this morning after by Wendy Schiller, chair of the Political Science Department at Brown University. We heard from the candidates themselves, Wendy, saying that they were tearing each other apart. Is that what you heard and saw on the Democratic stage last night?
Well, I actually saw some more strategic campaigning than we did in the previous debate a week ago, in that Bernie Sanders is clearly at the moment, he's only got 34 delegates compared to Pete's 23 delegates. He needs 1,991. But nonetheless, the media says he's a front runner. You got to go after the front runner. You have to if you want to make any progress, because it shows that you think you have a chance to win. It's signal sending. So I think a lot of people did a much better job of that last night. I think Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, they all did better at that. I think who didn't do better at that is Warren. She keeps sort of being friends with Bernie as if she's trying to get his supporters, but she doesn't want to, attack him. I just don't know how that works. Why go for Warren when you can have the real deal in Bernie? So I don't think it will work, and I was surprised about that. She took a lot of opportunity to attack Bloomberg, and I just thought it was a strategic mistake on her part.
Oh, the question, I guess, is now that we're into the actual voting in this race, are the attacks against Sanders coming too little too late now?
I don't think so, no. I mean, we have, 3 big Tuesdays coming up in March. Lots of different states from lots of different parts of the country. Yes, the first one's more Southern dominated, but then you have Western states, you have Midwestern states. So you're going to see how Bernie plays all over the country rather than the first couple. And we're going to see what the turnout is. I think the bigger concern for the Democratic Party generally is, what if the turnout is low? Because we know that if people turn out in the primary, they will vote in the general. They know where their polling place is. They're registered. This is a big key. This is why Trump's people are trying to get people to turn out in Republican primaries, even though he's not really challenged by anybody who can top him. They're trying to get him out because they understand that mechanism. So the Democrats are worried not only about the contention in the party, but also what if they just don't have good turnout in these primaries? That's just a bad sign for November.
You mentioned Elizabeth Warren continuing to send attacks Michael Bloomberg's way. She wasn't the only one who was doing that. How does that potentially muddle the race when you have attacks coming against the perceived frontrunner and another candidate who has the resources that Michael Bloomberg continues to wield in this race?
Well, Nathan, what you're pointing out is a really important thing that I think some people, maybe my generation, kind of overlook, is that this is just a multimedia campaign, right? It's not just a sort of network TV debate. It's, what is your airtime? What is your social media ad buy? These are all happening at the same time. And at least where I live, Bloomberg ran ads during the debate. And I thought that was a really smart thing to do. It just gives you extra airtime, so you don't have to worry about your airtime on the stage so much. And they're very slick ads. So the resource thing is a big deal. If Bloomberg can get some votes in the next couple of weeks, I think it makes people think, wait a minute, this person would have the resources to counter the Trump machine. And I think that's a big sell. Is it a big enough sell to topple Bernie? Bernie looks like Trump right now. About 38% of the party's on his side, between 28 and 38%, in the very minimal evidence we have so far. So let's see believe Bernie can expand his base in the party, but what's blocking him is that people have a lot of resources like Bloomberg to run a lot of ads that remind people about the flaws in Bernie. And they were pretty evident on stage last night. This was a roadmap for Trump. Just as Bernie gave Trump a roadmap to attack Hillary, the other candidates gave Trump a roadmap to attack Bernie.
And but as I say, there were attacks on both sides, and you're kind of seeing this identity crisis playing out among the lesser polling candidates in the Democratic race, presenting a choice between Bernie Sanders, who had to defend his past comments in praise of Fidel Castro, and Michael Bloomberg, who has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in this race and used to be a Republican.
Yeah, it's pretty striking. And people resorted to their own sort of strengths, right? Elizabeth Warren was talking about, her policies, getting things done, being progressive, changing the party. Klobuchar kept saying, listen, I can get things done too, but I don't have the baggage that Bloomberg has. So if you're thinking about a Bloomberg, look at me. So I think that she was pretty effective. She was better than she was last time. And people are saying the same thing. I think Democrats have to decide who will be best positioned to win in a general election. And that's quite different from who's best positioned to win in their own primaries. And let's look at what happens with African-American vote, not only who they choose, but turnout in South Carolina. Biden claims to have a lot of African-American support. So did Hillary Clinton throughout the debates in 2016. Turns out African-American support dropped for Clinton, and it didn't get out the door in terms of giving her the victory. So even claiming, credit for that may not be enough for Biden to really catch Bernie Sanders.
So when you talk about the candidates needing to make the argument that they would be better positioned in a general election fight, are you saying that they should be honing their attacks more on President Trump as opposed to each other?
Well, that's always the big dilemma in a crowded primary with an incumbent. How do you do that? This is what happened to Romney also, how do you actually tell people, look, I know you're focusing on whether you want me per se, but you have to think about who can defeat Donald Trump. But the problem is nobody thought Donald Trump would win. So the idea that we can predict what's going to happen in November, Bernie's got, history on his side. Look, you don't know that I can't beat the guy. I have more enthusiasm than everybody else, which is true. And I can get people out the door that haven't voted before. He talked about young people last night in the kind of numbers that we need. Now, he hasn't done that yet in his victories. And so over March, if we do see more people getting out the door, if we do see different people voting for Bernie than have not voted before or voted for anybody else, then he has claim to that argument that he could be, the Democratic progressive version of Trump in 2020. It's a long road to prove that, but that's something Bernie is obviously trying to do.
Thanks for this, as always. Wendy Schiller, chair of the Political Science Department at Brown University. We should mention Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. And Bloomberg Terminal customers can follow all the latest in the Democratic race by typing ELEC GO on their terminals. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. And we continue to watch the markets this morning with S&P futures higher up 6 points, Dow futures up 7, and NASDAQ futures up 22. The DAX in Germany is lower, down 0.9%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32, yield 1.36%, and the yield on the 2-year at 1.18%. And NYMEX crude oil down 1.1%. Bloomberg surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from...
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas.
Every time the kids are together, it's always the same. Never a moment's peace. Didn't take me long to work out the trick, though. Shredded chicken and black bean enchiladas with lime, oregano, and my little secret. A bit of smoke and spice with chipotle paste. Hear that? Never failed yet.
Make your own Rowdy Enchiladas with Tesco British Chicken. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco.
sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry she wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change on every morning brew. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple of years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, equity markets struggling for stability after a 4-day rout as House officials warn Americans brace for an outbreak of the coronavirus, and President Trump standing by as Democrats rip into one another. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Wednesday. Here is your Wednesday morning price action. Equity futures all over the place. The S&P 500 now totally unchanged on the session, coming in just a couple of points. In the bond market, Treasury yields all-time lows. On a 10-year, 136. On a 2-year, we are 118. Big moves in the bond market over the last 24 hours, just off records, Tom Keene. But this morning, it's the bull steepener. It's driven by the front end. Yields come in 2 basis points on a 2-year yield.
Really extraordinary. First of all, the tape has improved in the last 2 hours. There's no question about that. When I walked in the door here, John, this is like 3 hours before you walk in the door. When I walked in the door, it was grim, except Japanese yen. The yen really hasn't strengthened in a safe haven way. We're at now a 110.46. Maybe we're at 110.30, but I expected 109.80, and it wasn't there. Other than that, it was grim, and the major message is it's an improved tape over 2 hours.
It's been really, really difficult to get a clear read on the Japanese yen over the last couple of weeks, but if you look at the bond market, I think there is a clear signal coming from treasuries at the moment. You don't get a move lower in 30-year yields. You don't get a move lower in 10-year yields this morning. You get a move at the front end, and it's the front end that's beginning to price in the Fed at a time when the Vice Chair, Richard Clarida, gave no signal whatsoever that they were going to do anything in the last 24 hours. Look, if he gave the signal, I think they start to panic, and that doesn't look good. Honestly, 20 days out from a Fed meeting. We've still got 20 days to go before the Fed sits around a table and has 48 hours to decide what they want to do next.
What could he have said? Honestly, what could he have said other than we are looking at the data and every meeting is live? Their next meeting isn't until April, and that's basically what he was saying.
And that was at 3 o'clock yesterday. I was suggested 4 a.m. this morning. If I look at the data, it was a grim 2-year yield. It's a 2 standard deviation move lower yield, John. That was extraordinary at a 116, even 115.
118, Fed rate cuts in sight. This is a market that's positioning for it now. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear to see for everyone in the bond market this morning.
We had a 48 handle for a cup of coffee, a surveillance cup of coffee on West Texas. Right now, 49.18. I would say oil has been correlating with that tough stock market. But again, it's flighty. Is that the right word?
Maybe. We've got to do a couple of things this morning, that's for sure. We've got to get the market view. We'll do that very shortly with BNP Paribas. Then we've got to get the corporate view. We'll hear from someone who's got half of their revenue coming out of China, a big miner in Rio Tinto, the CEO, coming up very shortly.
This is not a normal mining interview because they've got huge financial obligations in their dividend. We're going to quiz them closely on where is that cash flow and how much do you really appropriate to the dividend.
Let's start with Greg Battle, shall we? BNP Paribas US Head of Equity and Derivative Strategy. Good morning to you, Greg.
Good morning.
Have we seen the washout, the clean out of sentiment, or are you still waiting for that big moment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've been looking at 30-40 on the S&P. The 200-day moving average is something where we may see a little bit more of a line in the sand drawn. We've had a massive move in the last couple of days in equities, but it has only been 2 days of de-risking. We came into this last week with markets at all-time highs. We wrote a piece at the start of this year where we highlighted some of the irrational exuberance, some of the stretched growth valuations of growth stocks, the stretched valuation of equity markets generally. So a 2-day correction, I don't think is nearly enough to wash out some of the positioning.
The consensus has had it all beaten out of it over the last week or so. The V-shaped recovery, haven't heard much about that in the last 24 hours. Is that done, dusted? Have we moved on from that?
I don't know, really. It depends how the data unfolds. It depends what happens with the virus. It depends what happens with the Fed. If you have a situation where the virus does not impact the US consumer, doesn't impact the US labor market, and you get a reaction from the Fed, that's the type of environment that drives a V-shaped recovery. If the labor market or the US consumer slow considerably, then I think we're in for a much kind of more sustained, turbulent time.
Who's suffering the biggest losses here? Because there was a story about how leverage at hedge funds ticked up dramatically right before the sell-off.
I think it's not contained just in the hedge fund community. When we look at positioning statistics, whether it's kind of retail or leverage in terms of systematic strategies, institutional investors, it looks like the momentum and the rally that we've had over the last 10 years, but certainly the last 6 months or so, has drawn a lot of people into the equity market. So I think there's a lot of leverage, and that's why we've seen such a kind of sharp reversal in the last couple of days.
What are you looking for to determine catharsis?
I think that really we have to see what happens in terms of the data, what happens in terms of the Fed. I think it's far too early to expect equity markets to find a level. I think we're going to see some volatility over the next couple of weeks.
That was a public answer. I mean, give us the truth here. What are we going to see in terms of catharsis? What's the bet on the street right now? I mean, have people positioned given 2 difficult days down?
I don't think 2 days is enough for positioning to wash out. So I think we're going to get much more volatility. You mentioned that we're seeing the futures start to bounce a little bit this morning. We expect volatility. It's not going to move in a straight line. We could easily get kind of a decent up day, but that could easily be followed by another couple of down days. So I think we're going to see a lot more volatility before positioning washes out for this one.
Final question, really, really quickly. March 18th. As things stand, your view right now, do the Fed go or do they wait?
I think they're more likely to wait, but it's going to be data dependent. It's going to depend on the evolution of not just what happens in terms of the virus, the data, but also what happens in terms of markets.
You sound like a Fed official. Great to catch up with you. Greg Battle there of BNP Paribas.
He looks like a Fed official.
We moved the conversation on from markets to the world of business, and a really important conversation coming up, Tom.
Not only geographically important, but the culture of all of mining, with the crash and burn of mining pushing back 7-8 years ago. When the China boom was over, BHP Billiton, Rio Tinto, all of them just absolutely imploded. And our guest is one of the people that truly, without hyperbole, pulled them out of the ashes.
And made a massive shift from volume to value and posted the highest profits in 8 years last year. And now a little bit of difficulty coming from one of their biggest customers, China. Jean-Sébastien Jacques joins us now, Rio Tinto CEO. JS, fantastic to have you with us. Let's just get into the business in China straight away. What are the customers telling you right now?
Yeah, good morning. First, as you said, China accounts for more than 50% of our turnover. So we're spending a lot of time discussing to our Chinese customers and suppliers. We discussed with around 200 of those in the last 48 hours. Where the situation is today is there is clearly uncertainty. However, 2 things which is important from our perspective. One is order books of iron ore, which is our main commodity, are full, and we are moving the product to China without any issues whatsoever. That's the first point. The second point is, if I take a more medium-term view and I look at the back end of this year, we have no doubt, and we've got all the signals that the Chinese government will implement a stimulus package. They've already started, and from past history, when the Chinese implement a stimulus package, it's going to be pretty intense in terms of commodities, which could be a very good piece of news. Right. So some no issues as we are having this conversation, but we acknowledge there could be uncertainty, and we are prepared for it.
John, I want to cut to the chase, and there was a terrific Bloomberg opinion piece out on this earlier today. You got a 7% yield. You've got massive dividend growth over the last 5 years. What is the elasticity of the responsiveness of the board to what you do with the dividend in the future?
That's a very good question, but as you remember, in early 2016, we have changed our policy to move toward the variable policy, and the policy is very clear: 40 to 60 100% of the underlying earnings through the cycle. In the last few years, we were always above the policy. And if you look what we have declared yesterday, it's 60% of the earnings as per the policy, plus a special dividend of $1 billion, which would take us to 70%. So the elasticity is very clear. It's directly linked to the earnings.
Okay, but I want to go to your science of years ago and, frankly, your mining engineering. What's your x-axis on the dividend? How many weeks, how many quarters of this shock, the supply shock, can you stand to keep the dividend strong? Or is there a point where you do have to change the dividend policy?
I don't think we'll have an issue with the dividend policy per se, because it's a variable policy. That's one aspect. Now, the second point, which is more important from a real standpoint, is if I look at the quality of my assets, which are low cost, which are the lowest in the industry, plus the quality of my balance sheet, is I've got no issue whatsoever to continue to deliver superior value for our shareholders, as we've done for the last 4 years, because in the last 4 years, we have delivered $36 billion of cash return to our shareholders.
Right now, I'm looking at the inventories in China, and China's steel inventories have expanded to a record high due to the disruption from the coronavirus and the halt in building. How much more do you think that iron ore prices have to drop here if the coronavirus is not contained in the near term?
That's a very good question. I can't answer on prices, otherwise the lawyers would kill me as always, so I can't do that. However, what is very interesting in the last few weeks, what the government or what the steel industry has done, they have shut down most of their EAF converters, which are primarily scrap-based in order to produce steel, but the blast furnaces, which are using iron ore, have only slowed down. And if you look at the volumes going into China, if you look at the inventory of iron ore at the port, they have not moved. And as I said today, my order books on iron ore are absolutely sold out, and I'm moving everything to China.
Well, Jess, I think everyone would assume that's going one place, stockpiles, inventories, and it's not going to get deployed anytime soon. So let's talk about that. You're saying you're going to get stimulus out of China. What kind of stimulus? Where's it going to go?
I think the stimulus will maybe slightly different from the past, because, as I said, so far the crisis in China is about services, about construction, about the back end of the manufacturing. They're going to have to support all those aspects of the economy, but I've got no doubt they will invest a little more or even more on infrastructure, as they've done in the past, because that's the best way for them to stimulate the economy, and it's commodity rich. So the second half of this year, I'm not too concerned.
JS, always great to get your view. Fantastic to have you with us on the programme this morning. That's Jean-Sébastien Jacques, the Rio Tinto CEO, joining us on the latest in China, Tom.
Well, you look at Rio Tinto and you look at the mining companies, and as you said, John, I think Americans to a great extent don't understand that linkage of Australia over to China. And we should point out, we didn't have time for it, but he has a small experiment in Mongolia, a copper mine, which, to be blunt, is not going well.
You bring up Australia. Have you seen the Aussie dollar?
I have missed. Please inform me.
The weakest since spring '09. Just think about that. Big proxy for China.
Should I develop a chart for this?
You should. You should.
Should I go Aussie yen?
It would look like an ugly, ugly chart for
Aussie
the Aussie
rand?
dollar. Do the Aussie against the US dollar.
Aussie US dollar. We'll do that. With the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. 7 Democratic presidential contenders staged their final debate before contests in South Carolina and Super Tuesday, and delivered more than a third of the delegates needed to clinch the nomination. The debate, presented by CBS and heard on Bloomberg, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders defended the comments he made in regards to Fidel Castro and comparing them to comments made by former President Barack Obama.
Of course you have a dictatorship in Cuba. What I said is what Barack Obama said in terms of Cuba, that Cuba made progress on education. Yes, I think, really?
Yes, because there's no comparing those two comments.
What Barack Obama said is they made great progress on education and health care. That was Barack Obama.
Meanwhile, Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg, who took part in last night's debate, has canceled 4 events in South Florida set for today because of illness. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases says the coronavirus is under control in the U.S. Dr. Anthony Fauci says, though, U.S. health officials have a plan to deal with a large number of coronavirus cases.
We've had a pandemic preparedness plan that we really developed in preparation for pandemic influenza that we can extrapolate to this.
Meanwhile, South Korea has seen infections surge to more than 1,200. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom?
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much indeed. That was the news. Let's get you some price action, shall we? This Wednesday morning, equities all over the place. Positive now, around about 8 points. The S&P 500 up 1/3%, following a 4-day rout. Much more still to come. You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Influential
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract, non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
WW Weight Watchers Reimagined have a new customised weight loss programme, MyWW, where no foods are off limits. Just fill out a simple assessment and get matched to a plan that suits you. You love eating carbs, cooking at home, or eating out? No problem with this new customised plan. Discover which new MyWW plan can make losing weight easier for you. Shape up for spring and pay just $9.95 per month. Offer ends 29th of February. Digital plan price. Subscription fees and conditions apply. Mainland UK only. See website for details.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. stock index futures reversed losses, moving higher now, while stocks in Europe and Asia are dropping as investors spread over fresh evidence of the widening coronavirus outbreak. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg, with S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 22, NASDAQ futures up 25. The DAX in Germany's down 0.8%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 1.37%. Yield on the 2-year 1.19%, and the 30-year yield at 1.85%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.4% or 69 cents at $49.21 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.3% or $4.80 at $16.45.40 an ounce. The euro 1.0888 against the dollar. British pound 1.2927 and the yen at 110.52. Watching shares of Lowe's, they're down about 3% in early trading. Fourth quarter sales narrowly missing analyst estimates despite a buoyant U.S. housing market. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that. Again, more data checks here. Karen Moscow with those world-class data checks, and John and I and Lisa will fill in the holes as we can. A much better tape than 2 hours ago. From the Interactive Broker Studios, 5 things you need to know real quick. On the debate, I thought it would be more like Las Vegas. I was wrong.
They lost control of that, didn't they?
They did.
That was just chaos yesterday. And I think if the attack was on Senator Sanders, he left without many bruises. And I think if you're the President of the United States, you're probably still smiling from last week into this week and out to Super Tuesday.
What geography does he play in, Lisa, besides Madison, Wisconsin, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Berkeley, California?
I think that in Las Vegas, he showed that he could get a coalition. And I think that that's the key.
Yeah,
with the Latinos and beyond the sort of young white base. So I think that's what they were trying to compete against. Unclear whether they actually made a dent.
I was thunderstruck. They really didn't bring up the Latino segment of the population, which has radically changed in 4 years, just because of time in the markets. Let's move on. Virus medicine. Peter Hotez with us yesterday was outstanding. Here's a tweet moments ago from Dr. Hotez. Conflicting, confusing messages from U.S. government yesterday. He says the 2 cabinet CDC's most credible, but having public disagreement contributes to American fears. I'm trying to gauge the sweat out there.
I think this is critical, and we've made the point multiple times on this program that we want to lead the medical issues to the medical professionals, and a little bit later in this program we'll catch up with Jimmy Whitworth of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, so look out for that interview later.
Really important.
But I think yesterday was this example, purely from the market's perspective, who do you have faith in anymore? So the administration, the President of the United States, Larry Kudlow, came out and said, we've got this contained. Then the CDC came out and said, it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more of a question of exactly when this will happen. That's what the market's adjusting to more broadly, losing faith in officials, whether it's the administration, whether it's officials in China to contain this virus, and whether it's officials' response to actually stimulate the economy and offset some of the economic pain.
There's a broader tangible issue here. The Washington Post reporting that the U.S. has not sent tests for the coronavirus out to a lot of the hospitals. A very small group of hospitals actually have the tests to go out and figure it out, way behind South Korea.
Again, because of time, let's fold this medical issue into the market issue. I'm watching yen is the be-all of safe haven, but I got to admit, John, I was thunderstruck at the 2-year positioning 2.5 hours ago.
Yeah, the Treasury curve is really interesting this morning. So 30-year yields are actually higher. They're higher by 3 basis points, and at the front end yields are a little bit lower, so we're getting this steeper curve, and we're pricing in Fed easing. So we have a yield at 2-year of around about 120. That's what we're drifting towards. The interesting thing for me at the moment is the tension between market pricing and Fed communication, because we heard from Vice Chair Richard Clarida just yesterday, and there was no real change to his tone
Lisa,
or emphasis.
You do this better than me. What's the measurement you have on the Fed cuts? Are we into 4 rate cuts yet?
No, and actually we've pulled back from some of the biggest expectations for rate cuts by the first quarter of next year. So we still have a little bit more than 2 rate cuts priced in, or actually closer to 3 by the end of January. But here's the thing, John, to that point, the Fed not communicating that, but the market has called the Fed's hand again and again. And frankly, the Federal Reserve does risk a taper tantrum type of move if they do not deliver, which is a big concern at a time when you already have bond sales basically frozen because people don't want to issue right now.
I'll try to get this out, a fancy chart in the 2-year yield back to the presidency, and even before that, it's 2 standard deviations down in the yield. That was earlier this morning, 1.1846 now on the 2-year yield. Okay, you guys are fixed income gurus as well. My cardinal rule is when in crisis, fixed income always speaks the clearest. John, what do they speak right now?
100 basis points of widening on high yield spreads. Look at 417 and in around 420. That's not a particularly weak level for high yield to be trading at. In fact, historically, it's pretty rich still. But the move, I think, will be of concern. And I think Lisa's touched on something really quite important. December 2018, the Fed made a move, not just because equities rolled over, but because the primary market, the market where companies come to issue debt, completely seized up for some borrowers. And that's what the Fed had to respond to. If we get a situation like that, then the Fed's going to be very, very worried about financial financial conditions and the availability of credit, not just the supply and the price of it.
Well, that's the incredible irony right now. As the market is pricing in almost 3 Fed rate cuts by the beginning of next year, we're seeing the new issuance market grind to a halt on both corporate bonds as well as IPOs. Basically, financial conditions are tightening, and this raises a conundrum. How does the Fed ease rates more than the market is expecting to basically say, we've got your back, not we're in a crisis, we're behind the ball, and we need to get on it?
Everybody's reacting to this, but so much of this to me is, you're looking at, like, we all have our interest in the geography of this crisis. There were the French headlines out of another death there. And to Dr. Hotez yesterday, is it that we're all wired in now? I mean, Gene Frieda at PIMCO was brilliant on this today. He said, look, this is not SARS. China's 4 times bigger vibrancy than it was under SARS.
Well, I mean, it sort of goes
we're all connected.
There's nothing to fear but fear itself. There's a question. We don't have a lot of information.
Well,
no, honestly.
John, this is before Lisa's time.
Oh, dear Lord. Listen, I think that we have a situation where we have a virus that compares to the influenza, right? And as far as the death rate, we don't have clarity because we don't have totals. But still, it isn't that big. It's not SARS. That said, things are shutting down. Yeah. We don't necessarily know it responds with respect to medicine. We don't know exactly the correct treatment. We don't know the virology, the way that other viruses have displayed.
Okay, can we switch gears here? And I don't want to talk about Montreal and they're trading the whole team away. They tried to trade away Ken Dryden last night, but it didn't work out. John, I was thunderstruck, and I'm spoiled by the Tots and, what they've done to my stadium, but I was thunderstruck watching Chelsea, the blue team, in the field they play in. It looked like sort of like AA baseball in America.
Stamford Bridge.
What's going on there?
It's an old stadium. I think they were trying to build a new stadium once upon a time. I'm not sure what's happened to the plans. It's also the atmosphere that bugs me about some London clubs. So this is West London, Stamford Bridge in Chelsea.
Stop. Where is it from Claridge's?
Claridge's is not too far away. Look, the key story here is it's expensive, and it prices out a lot of fans from being able to watch. So what happens is you get a lot of wealthy fans that maybe aren't interested in the game. They turn up, they don't make much noise. Similar story at the Emirates for Arsenal. Bad atmosphere. Do you know where you used to have a really good atmosphere? East London, Upton Park, West Ham.
That's West Ham.
That's fantastic. Team. Now they're at the Olympic Stadium, the old Olympic Stadium.
Can West Ham really get relegated?
Possibly. They're in there. They're in the relegation
zone. Did you change your accent when you go to Stamford Bridge, whatever it's called?
Put on a thick London accent to survive.
This is Bloomberg. Good morning. Stay with us.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock future.
At UKME, our chauffeur service is 6-star. just like the package we offer our drivers. Join the company that treats its drivers like VIPs. Apply today at ukme.co.uk.
Discover Ireland's wild Atlantic way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Can I have chemo at home?
It's only suitable for a couple of types of cancer.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We are live on Bloomberg Radio. A 4-day rout on the S&P 500 this morning, 2 hours out from the opening bell. Equity futures all over the place overnight this morning. Dead flat right now, Tom King.
Oh, it's all over the place. Flighties, literally, folks, you look away from the Bloomberg terminal, you look back, and it's changed. I mean, that's where we are right now.
Treasury yields up a single basis point, a 10-year to 136, up 2 on a 30-year to 185, and coming down 2 basis points at the front end as we shift towards the view that the Fed's going to cut quite soon. 118 is your yield on a 2-year right now.
Persistence in oil, 49.15 with a 48 handle earlier. Oil doesn't want to rally this morning.
Aussie dollar weaker again.
Yeah, I did that chart. I put the chart out on Twitter, folks. I'll get it out on LinkedIn, I hope. And you were right, John. I mean, it's really something back 30 years.
Swissy stronger too. That FX market just picking up on some of the risk out there.
Can I just point out there was the biggest outflow ever from the biggest U.S. junk bond
I saw
ETF.
your tweet on that.
$1.6 billion of an outflow for
in what,
a 15...
1 hour?
1 day.
In one day, $1 billion walked out the door?
More than $1.5 billion.
Do we know where it went?
Well, this is the thing. The volume in that fund was actually really high, which means it probably was on the heels of trading and not just some sort of in-kind trade. So people are actually looking at this as a potential canary to watch. Okay,
what we're going to do right now, folks, is do politics, but try to do it in a different way. We're all exhausted by the, 24/7, 25/8 punditry that we see there, the gaming of the polls, etc. And we thought we'd haul in here an academic that's not only spent time looking at the broader picture of the American political fabric, but actually has really delved into the machinery of politics. One of her great efforts is Core Concepts in American Government. It is a real basic look at the basic process of what we do in politics. Ginny Zano joins us right now from Iona College, and of course, a Bloomberg contributor here this political season. Wonderful to have you here.
So good to be here.
You're wearing blue. Was that for the debate last night? Did red take the victory off the blue debate last night?
No, you're right. I should be wearing purple or something that doesn't indicate some kind of partisanship. No, it was just the dress I found.
How much did Mr. Trump win the debate last night?
I ranked him as one of the big winners last night. The Democrats, and this is not about the candidates necessarily, but this process does not work to the benefit of the Democratic Party or any of those candidates up there. And as a result, he continues to win.
Is the salvation for everybody against the senator from Vermont just what you mentioned, which is the purpleness of Texas, the purpleness of California? I mean, is it go to Super Tuesday? Is that really the heart of the matter? Is the moderates have to find a way to actually get tangible votes?
Well, the moderates have to get votes. There are moderates in the Democratic Party. They are the biggest contingent of the party. But what has to happen is you can't have 5 moderates running against Bernie Sanders because he will come away even with a plurality every time.
Well, Ginny, what are they going to do? Get into a room and decide who drops out? I mean, let's get real. How does this work?
Well, I think, there's going to have to be pressure from the party that those moderates who are polling in the single digits leave the race. So I think Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, people I like enormously, but you can't keep doing this because what they're doing is they care about the moderates winning this thing. They've got to get out of the race if you're not polling.
You're blaming the process. You don't think that there's anything that the candidates themselves could do at the debate to turn the attention in a positive way toward the Democrats. Is that the implication here?
I think it's very, very tough given this process. If we think about, in a business, if you're hiring somebody for a job, and I always say to students, if you're hiring an accountant and you say, I'm going to hire you if you run the fastest mile, that's essentially what we're doing. We're asking you to be president, but we're judging you on things that won't make you a good president. So there's a huge fissure within the way we hire for this job.
But this has been the process for time immemorial. Why is this time different?
It's not different. It's been the process since about the early 1970s. And we've long had, for academics, this has long been the bane of our existence, that the way that we elect presidents. But it's gotten worse as we have moved towards democratizing this process, quite frankly, and giving this thing over to primaries. People say, primaries are democratic. Turnout is incredibly low in these primaries. You get the most extreme voters out there. They vote, and you get the kind of chaos that we're seeing. And then you ask these people to do the impossible, which is get out on this stage and battle this thing out.
Ginny, to what degree do you think this party is really failing to display a real showing of humility to understand what is actually going on here in the same way that the Republican Party did 4 years ago? That it's easy to sit here and say that Senator Sanders wouldn't make a good candidate for a whole variety of reasons, but failing to understand ultimately what he's tapping into here and tapping into a broader and broader base as this campaign goes on. Are we failing to do that?
I think the Democratic Party, like any party, has a lot of different components to it, and one of those is the base that Bernie Sanders is speaking to. But I would say the party has to look at the reality. The reality is this race will be decided in about 6 moderate states. You go to Florida, and praising Fidel Castro is not a winning message to beat Donald Trump in 2020. It's simply not. So he does have a base. The Democrats need to understand what is activating that base, but they also need to be realistic about how you win this thing in November if they want to win.
Everyone who's voting should know that. They should know that. And I don't want to insult the base. I don't want to insult the electorate of any kind, Democrat or Republican. But they understand that. They're not idiots. They should know that already, but they're still voting for him. And by the way, if you look at the polls, as you know, they still think he's one of the better candidates to take on the President of the United States in November. So the question is, we keep doing this. We keep failing to understand what is actually going on here. These are educated people voting for this man. I imagine many of them have college degrees. They know the situation in Florida, the relationship with Cuba, and yet they go to the poll in Nevada, they go to the polls in South Carolina, and they vote for him.
Yeah, but let's keep in mind, again, when you're looking at the primary vote, this is the most extreme members of both parties. So you get candidates. Let's be clear. Bernie Sanders is an independent. He's not even a Democrat, similar to Donald Trump. And so the party has lost control of this process long before 2020, by the way, and that will continue.
But do they get back control once they get to an adult high money process like Super Tuesday? I mean, is it literally a jump condition out of the vote, and the next day everything's different for the party?
I don't think so. I mean, at this point, I think if you're going to look at the numbers, Bernie Sanders has the greatest chance to get the delegate count he needs to wrap this up without a contested convention. I think that's the reality. But let's be clear. This is not just about the presidency. It's about the House. It's about the Senate. And it's about the party. If you're a Democrat, it should be about the future of the party. And this is where they have a problem.
I'm going to say, John, I didn't think that there was a feeling of disrespect of Bernie Sanders last night. It was more just saying he didn't get anything done. I don't think that there was a sense of a lack of humility.
No, I'm talking about the coverage. I'm talking about the pundits that reflect on all of this. This party's had 4 years to prepare for this moment. They squandered most of that 4 years chasing the president, trying to impeach him and criticising him every day. You watch the same channels as I do. The left-wing brigade go out there day after day after the president, and yet here we are. And let me tell you, if Vice President Joe Biden was leading in Nevada, in New Hampshire, in Iowa, we wouldn't be talking about the process
Here's
this morning.
the problem. I would say that this is it, Tom, and I'm looking at this as what emerges from this debate, and it's the idea that you have on one hand electability, and on the other hand, the fact that people want change and trying to reflect that zeitgeist that you're talking about. And those two things are appealing to two very bifurcated segments of the population, and that's what we're feeling coming out of these debates.
Gina Zaino, when we look at this, I guess we've got to get past the South Carolina vote. What do you predict on Monday, or for that matter, on Sunday next?
I think the numbers show that probably Bernie Sanders has about a 40 to 50% shot at this point of getting what he needs. He did so well with the Latino vote, for instance, in Nevada. If he can replicate that in places like California and Texas, he can keep racking up the delegate lead. Obviously, Super Tuesday has about 1/3 of the delegates up. Now, I would not predict what's going to happen, but I would say the probability is narrow that he is going to do okay. But again, it depends.
Gina Zaino, thank you so much, with Bloomberg Politics, of course, helping us here. And with Iona College this morning. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university, and the latest U.S. News and World Report. College rankings. Learn more. Do that at news.njit.edu. Here's Bob Moon.
Tom, Lisa, Jonathan, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. The nation's top auto safety investigators strongly suggest drivers don't take their eyes off the road. Not even with Tesla's supposedly amazing autopilot system. At a hearing into recent Tesla crashes, National Transportation Safety Board Chairman Robert Sumwalt said investigators have concluded the driver of a Tesla SUV who died in a Silicon Valley freeway crash 2 years ago was likely distracted.
He was playing a video game on his smartphone.
And the car's partially automated driving system steered the vehicle straight into a concrete barrier because it was operating under conditions it could not handle. Much of the board's frustration was directed at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and to Tesla, which have not acted on recommendations the NTSB passed 2 years ago to add driver monitoring safeguards. The NTSB investigates crashes but only has authority to make recommendations. NHTSA can enforce the advice and manufacturers also can act on it. Sumwalt declared sternly that drivers need to know they can't drive and read a book, they can't watch a movie or a TV show, they can't text, and they can't play video games.
If you own a car with partial automation, you do not own a self-driving car. So don't pretend that you do.
Sumwalt said the problem of drivers distracted by smartphones will keep spreading if nothing is done. Among the board's recommendations is for tech companies to design smartphones and other electronic devices so they don't operate if they're within a driver's reach, unless it's an emergency. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Tom, Lisa, Jonathan.
Bob Moon, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let's get you some news, some headlines worldwide from New York City. Let's say good morning to Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John, Tom, Lisa. Democratic presidential hopefuls met on stage at last night's debate in Charleston, South Carolina. It was a wild debate on CBS and heard on Bloomberg, with the candidates often fighting to speak over one another. Senator Amy Klobuchar called for unity among the Democrats.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
The debate comes days before the South Carolina primary and a week ahead of Super Tuesday. A member of the U.S. military station at Camp Carroll near Daegu, South Korea, has tested positive for the coronavirus. He is the first U.S. service member to be diagnosed with the virus. The service member was under self-quarantine when he tested positive. In a live stream video, U.S. AG Daegu Commander Colonel Edward Blanco
told troops the base is taking measures to keep the virus from spreading.
The war is not over against this virus. We're ultimately going to absolutely win. We're going to crush the virus. We're going to protect our people. We're going to be just fine. This is a setback.
Colonel Blanco says the service member is receiving excellent care and he's confident that he will recover. Egypt is holding a full honors military funeral for former President Hosni Mubarak, who was ousted from power in the 2011 Arab Spring uprising. Mubarak, who was 91 years old, died yesterday at a Cairo military hospital from heart and kidney complications, according to Associated Press. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, sir, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give you a peek into this market, shall we? Cross-asset worldwide. Your equity market's shaping up as follows. Over in Europe, it has been painful for the DAX. We trim another 1 percentage point off the equity benchmark in Frankfurt, Germany. In the United States, a 4-day rout. And I have to say, equity futures this morning, Tom, really just quite choppy, all over the place. We're now down just 3 points off 0.1%, but the range so far has been quite wide.
7:43 Wall Street time, and you know, John, we're going to get to a vision at 9:20, then we open 9:30, and you have no idea, looking at this tape right now, how you adjust over that 30-minute open out. Of course, you'll be doing the open on Bloomberg Television.
Well, at the cash open yesterday, Tom, we were positive for the best part of 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and then it's a new market.
Then 10 a.m., we rolled over aggressively. From New York City this morning, so much coming up on this program. Stay tuned on Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg Radio.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Shares of Juventus Football Club, home to star player Cristiano Ronaldo, fell amid fears the coronavirus outbreak in northern Italy could lead to some top division matches being played in empty stadiums. The Italian Football Federation is said to be planning for some games to take place behind closed doors. Juventus has already temporarily closed its club museum. The governing body of British Cycling will lose its main sponsor after the Tokyo Olympics, potentially harming the long-term strength of the country's top-performing sport at recent games. The governing body said that HSBC has decided to exercise a break clause midway through an 8-year partnership with British Cycling due to a shift in UK marketing and partnership priorities. The deal with HSBC was reportedly worth around £10 million or $13 million per Olympic cycle. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Air Force One landed at Joint Base Andrews this past hour. The president back on American soil. Jeremy Diamond reports Mr. Trump says he plans to get busy right away with the coronavirus outbreak.
The president just returned to Washington from India. The president there perhaps trying to now reassure lawmakers after trying to reassure the market, saying that he is heading to the White House and that he has meetings and calls scheduled today, including with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, as well as with the CDC.
Israel's foreign minister denouncing Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders this morning after Sanders labeled Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a reactionary racist at last night's Democratic debate. The judge in the Roger Stone trial has questioned all members of the jury that convicted him, exploring allegations of juror misconduct raised by the defense. Stock markets in Asia and Europe have been posting major losses again today, but U.S. stock futures are down just a fraction this hour following 2 days of steep declines. I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures giving up their gains after they reversed losses earlier this morning, while stocks in Europe and Asia drop as investors fret over some fresh evidence of the widening coronavirus outbreak. Right now, S&P futures are little changed. Dow futures, they're down 40, and NASDAQ futures are up 2. The DAX in Germany is down 0.8%. The CAC in Paris down 0.7%, and the FTSE 100 down 0.6%. BNP Paribas strategist Greg Botel says Bloomberg surveillance that stocks probably won't travel in a straight line from here.
We expect volatility. It's not going to move in a straight line. We could easily get kind of a decent up day, but that could easily be followed by another couple of down days. So I think we're going to see a lot more volatility before positioning washes out.
And that's Greg Bodel, who spoke on Bloomberg surveillance earlier today. We're watching shares of Chesapeake Energy up 1.4% in early trading after the embattled U.S. shale oil and gas producer said it plans to slash capital spending and raise as much as $500 million from asset sales to fund debt that matures this year. 10-year Treasury is down 5/30 seconds. The yield 1.36%. The yield on the 2-year 1.18%. The 30-year yield 1.85%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.6% or 80 cents at $49.11 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.2% or $4 to $16.46 an ounce. The euro is at 1.0879 against the dollar. British pound 1.2919 and the yen 110.51. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. John Farrow, an important fiscal change for the nation of Germany.
Yeah, just crossing the Bloomberg that Germany plans to temporarily suspend the limit on public borrowing. A couple of things you need to know here, that any suspension, of course, would require a 2/3 majority in German parliament's lower and upper chambers.
Both.
So they have a debt break at the moment. Constitutionally, there is this debt break that means they can't borrow outside of an emergency environment. And clearly they're looking towards trying to suspend that limit on public borrowing. And this would be, according to some reports coming into this announcement in the last 30 minutes or so, this would be to reduce the debt burden of some of Germany's municipalities and to allow them perhaps to spend more. Lacking some details here, and I think that's why we're not seeing a big move in a German debt market.
What we're going to do is come back to this. Lisa, I know, wants to add a lot here on fiscal policy, one of her real focuses, but we've got him on the phone, so we've got to go there. Folks, there are people that do medicine from a distance, and then there's someone like Mr. Whitworth. Jimmy Whitworth is with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and John, without question, he has done the most in Africa. You can talk about it, you can put a piece of chalk in your hand and run a course on it, a lecture, and then there is the going and doing of it, and Jimmy Whitworth has done viruses like nobody else on the planet.
Fantastic to have Jimmy with us now, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Professor of International Public Health. Professor, fantastic to have you with us. From the market's perspective, and I ask this question exclusively from the perspective of investors right now, there is a lack of faith in the ability to contain this virus, that perhaps this has broken out to Europe and beyond, to the United States, maybe it's already here. Professor, put that in some context. From your point of view, where are we?
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that fulsome introduction. Very appreciative. I think we're in a very worrying situation at the moment. We have a situation, I think, where in China, with very heroic and strong public health measures, they have been able to get the outbreak there more or less contained. It's still going on, but it's not expanding at anything like the rate that it was, which is good. But the worry is that it has now spilled over into a number of other countries and regions in the world. So in the Middle East, we have this focus in Iran, which is worrying because that's getting into countries which have very poor health systems, places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. And we've got an expansion of cases in Italy, which is also crossing borders and I think threatens Western Europe more generally. And the thing is, this is an infectious disease. It does not recognize international borders and will spread wherever people move.
What's the worst case scenario that you see as somewhat likely?
I think that there is sustained transmission that occurs all over the globe. I'm worried particularly about what might happen in sub-Saharan Africa, where not only have we got weak health systems and surveillance systems and the like, but we also have people who have a lot of other infectious diseases, HIV and tuberculosis and so on, and it might well spread there. So it's really important that we put in the facilities that we can there.
The stereotypes that we have, Professor Whitworth, are so strong. I mean, it goes back to 1871 and Stanley and Livingston in Africa. And, you know, some of us watched a Spencer Tracy movie long ago. Those stereotypes are embedded. And one is those viruses over there are more virulent than what we face. Do you know the virulency of this virus? Is it equivalent to what you've seen in Africa, or is it a more common flu virus?
I think there are two things to look at here. One is how transmissible it is, and secondly is how virulent it is. And those things sometimes go in parallel, but sometimes don't. And this is a virus where they don't. So I'd say this is pretty highly transmissible. For every person who's infected, on average between 2 and 3 other people will get infected from that person, if nothing is done. So that's the challenge for public health authorities. In terms of its virulence, it isn't as bad as many other diseases. So something like 80 or more % of people who are infected will have mild illness and will recover, and it will be no problem. But we have 15 or 20% of people who are infected who get severe disease. These are people who need to be hospitalized, and on average they're staying in hospital for something like 10 to 14 days, which is a long time and puts a big strain on health services. And of all the people who are infected, 1 or 2% may die.
Professor, it sounds absolutely tragic, and forgive me because we only have 30 seconds left, but why the WHO not calling this a pandemic?
They say that that's an informal term. If people want to use it, that's fine. They do not formally declare pandemics. They've called it a public health emergency of international concern, and that's as high a level of severity as they go.
Professor, thank you so much. Jimmy Whitworth with us. We're just thrilled with their team's ability to bring in these true experts. Professor Whitworth with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, their professor of international public health, but he is really one of the world's axes on not just Ebola, but like 4 and 5 and 6 things I can't pronounce from Africa.
Attention turning to the policy response. We were talking about the Fed earlier. We'll be talking about Germany through the next hour. Some reporting from our team over in Berlin that according to an official familiar with the plan, Germany is planning to temporarily suspend the limit on public borrowing. Where that goes, what it's targeted at, I think that's critical, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Ahead of the opening bell in around about 1 hour and 30 minutes time, equity futures here in the United States following a 4-day rout on the S&P 500, unchanged. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
At
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Vodafone 5G will have the power to change your world. From driverless cars to virtual reality and real-time gaming. That's why we're rolling out 5G in London and across the UK. Discover Vodafone 5G on the UK's best mobile data network. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
NPerf testing awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance based on 35,664 tests on the NPerf app in the UK. Coverage may vary. Visit vodafone.co.uk.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
Fill the trolley with your favourite brands on rollback at Asda. A 38-pack of Fairy Non-Bio capsules was £8.50, now £5.75. A Lenore Gold fabric conditioner was £4, now £2.50. Big brands, small prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Lenore 1.925 litres. Ends 18th of March.
LED headlights. Heated front seats. 2-zone climatronic control. Selected Volkswagen Golf models now have more extras squeezed into them than ever before. And during our golf event from the 14th to the 29th of February, we'll also squeeze in a £500 customer saving and 0% APR.
With Solutions Personal Contract Plan available on stock vehicles only, ordered by 29th February 2020 and handed over by 31st March 2020. 18 plus subject to status. Excludes all Golf 8, Estate and SV models. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Financial Services. Visit volkswagen.co.uk.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The Federal Reserve's independence is crucial.
Central banks should be prepared and not presumptuous.
Finance.
In order to grow, you need to innovate.
Global money doesn't like uncertainty.
Investment.
I think the issue in the market is really more about the possibility of a recession in the next couple of years.
I do think we need to get back to where we have always been, the American dream.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. The shock of epidemic, and there's no question about it, pending pandemic seems to be the language of the day. I just heard that question from John Farrow, to one of the leading virologists in the world. We'll see where that goes, where you need to know where it goes. Continued headlines, including a death in France earlier this morning. Markets gyrate right now a little better, but it is back and forth like every 10 minutes, red or green on the screen, with some interesting bond action as well. I might point out there there was a debate last night in South Carolina. On to that vote on Saturday. John, without question, 2-year yield is a litmus paper. At what level does a 2-year yield say to Chairman Powell, cut rates now?
I think we're there, aren't we? I think that's what the 2 years looking for right now. It's looking for a rate cut from the Federal Reserve and maybe a couple more after that. 120 is your yield on a 2-year at the moment. In the equity market, a 4-day rout, losses of 7.6% on the S&P 500. We've talked about this medical clarification of whether it's a pandemic or not. I want to emphasize this is not a medical assessment, but from the perspective of market participants right now, we're there. China didn't contain this. It spread to Europe, spread to the Middle East, and now there's a fear that it could arrive if it's not here already in the United States. That is the fear. I want to emphasize that is the fear of market participants and not a medical assessment.
Futures up 7 right now. And Lisa, I like what Josh Brown says out on Twitter, working with Barry Ritholtz and over at the Death Star. And Josh Brown says simply, look, it's been a 600-point range this morning. That's what you got to know. The volatility is extraordinary.
I'm watching credit because I really do feel like that will be the canary. And we have seen already new issuances pulled from the market, people trying to wait out the potential volatility. I'm looking, though, at energy junk bonds in particular. And if you look at the early trading, bond market just opened, the credit market just opened, and you're seeing the declines continue in that patch in price. Yields even higher after spreads reached the highest since May 2016.
But is that virus, or is that just directly correlated into oil below 50 with a 48 print?
But that's connected, right? I mean, the oil is declining because of the concerns of a global economic slowdown on the heels of the coronavirus spreading.
And this, Lisa, I think is absolutely critical. We reflected on this in a previous hour that back in December 2018, the real trigger point for the Fed wasn't the move in equities. The real trigger point was in the credit market. If you tell the Fed that we've seen a tightening of financial conditions to the degree that it's no longer about the price of credit, but it's also about the supply, the availability of credit, and it looks like right now, at least in the early part of the week, things are still early, but we're there.
Well, and it's not just in credit markets. And exactly to that point, we are seeing issuance grind to a halt, but also issuance of IPOs. I was speaking with Kathleen Smith. She said it was completely healthy, and that pipeline just ground to a halt because nobody is going to go public right now.
When you talk about the pipeline, of course, you mentioned the German fiscal response that we saw there. We don't need to go over that right now, but let's bring in our guest, and he's focused on infrastructure in the United Kingdom and what Prime Minister Johnson is going to do. And John, I'll let you bring in our guest, but the marginal question is, do you build a new stadium for Chelsea, or do you build a new stadium for Arsenal?
Well, Kit's got a new stadium. The Emirates isn't that old. Kit Chu, SocGen's chief FX strategist on the phone.
But you don't like Emirates?
From London. I think the Emirates is a bit of a library. In fact, Kit and I have been to an Arsenal game together. I think we watched the North London derby. We watched Spurs against Arsenal, didn't we, Kit?
We did. Very good game.
Was it Theo Walcott? What was that, 4-0 something?
Did you wear a skinny tie?
I didn't go in a tie. You don't go to a tie to a football match, do you?
I do.
Of course he does. He wears a bow tie.
When I go to Tots, Kenneth Branagh thinks it's a great look.
Okay. Kit, should we turn to the Fed? Get away from football just for a moment.
We should get away from ties on football matches. That's
I think we should stay far away from Arsenal for good reason too. Kit, the Fed, are they cutting rates on in the middle of March when they meet next?
It might be a bit early in March, but I think I think it's true to say that this Fed, the previous Feds for 2 decades have been quick to cut rates when there's a problem because they figure that buying an insurance on the downside is cheap, that there's not enough inflation to scare them, and they've done this time and time again. To your previous conversation, we have credit spreads where they were in kind of the spring of 2018, but they blew out a lot further than this by the time we got to December 2018, and we don't feel like we're quite there yet, and the language from Rich Clarida didn't sound like they were there yet, and I heard that this morning, I guess, on the radio, but they're going to end up cutting, the market prices now has gone from pricing 1 cut this year to 2 cuts this year. We'll get more than that by the time we're done. It would take, unless everything goes wonderfully.
I just want to interrupt right now, John. The president, very active. We saw him land during the television show early this morning in the quiet early morning ride back to the White House. He is more than active and points, and I hope I have this right, a 6 p.m. evening press conference, and this will be focused with CDC representatives. This out on Twitter from the President of the United States.
This is significant because there seemed to be some daylight between the administration's view on what was happening with the coronavirus and the view of the CDC yesterday. So this morning, the President tweeting that I will be having a news conference at the White House on this subject today at 6 p.m. CDC representatives and others will be there, and I think it's important that everyone is there on the same page. Kit,
the lack of faith, the loss of faith in the policymaker over the last week or so, how important has that been to this move lower that we've seen in markets worldwide?
I don't know how important it's been. I think it's been more a market's been shocked by the realization that we don't know how many people are suffering from this virus epidemic in Europe. So we don't find out fast enough. There are people wandering around who are fine at the moment who haven't been tested and have a cold or something like that. And we don't know, but we know that the uncertainty is going to hurt economic growth, and the result of that is it's hurting companies in all the sectors that are affected. It's driving bond yields down, and it's hurting some currencies. But the currency market is much quieter. And I think it's perceived as an economic risk much more widely than it was 2 weeks ago. And I think, come back to the simple observation, I think the market increasingly is looking around and saying, we don't know if easier Fed policy will help, but it's what they do, isn't it? And when things go wrong, and that's what we'll get. I think there'll be people sort of throwing mud in the general direction of governments around the world and their reaction. I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I was in charge. So I think that's background noise to where we are now, which is the global economy wasn't in strong enough shape for this kind of problem. Global trade was too weak for this kind of problem, and it's not going to go away really quickly.
I'm struggling to understand this idea that the Fed has arguably the most room among the developed economies to cut rates and to ease, and people are expecting them to do just that in the face of the spread of the coronavirus. And yet the dollar continues to strengthen, resuming its trend today. What could potentially stop that as being the haven when you see Japan struggling much more economically?
Well, you've had a real shift in correlations between currencies and interest rates over the recent months, last year or so, much more towards a correlation with relative expectations about economic growth. So the answer for the dollar is that the dollar is only going to weaken when we get confirmation that the U.S. economy is slowing significantly. For 2 years now, people like me have looked at the U.S. economy and thought this cycle's old, it's under some pressure, and we might have had forecasts that are a bit pessimistic, and we've just revised forecasts at various points collectively higher. You put a chart of the 2019 for last year, or the 2020 consensus on the Bloomberg terminal up in front of you. It's an example of the consensus not coming down when it's been coming down everywhere else for the last year. That needs to change to weaken the dollar.
Kit, I want to take, and this we can do with Kit Jukes, folks, so not only this, but his foreign exchange work, but he really folds it into all the other asset classes as well. I'm going to put out on Twitter and LinkedIn the Bloomberg Commodity Index back a gazillion years adjusted for inflation. So it's like real commodities bundled in. Kit, we are now 30% on an inflation-adjusted basis below the nadir of the late 1960s. I mean, we're basically in a commodity implosion. What does that do through foreign exchange to all those different nations?
Well, I think it tells you about part of the reason why a lot of the most emerging economies, so a lot of emerging resource economies have relied on being able to export commodities into the rapid growth in China, perhaps more than anything else, and that's been what's happened. But we've expanded global supply of an enormous number of commodities. You turn the TV on, you see great big trucks in Africa and South America hauling stuff out of the ground that you can't even spell. And what that's done is it's driven down prices, and now the Chinese economy is slowing. It gets worse. It's a disinflationary pull, and I just what it does in foreign exchange is it means that all of those resource countries' currencies have a harder time, and all those of us who consume those goods have lower inflation than we would otherwise do and have the option to ease monetary policy. Those are the two things that happen at the same time.
Kit, euro on the week, stronger. Why?
Look, I think one of the things you can see on the terminal from the positioning is there are more people who are long the euro than short, but the shorts have much bigger positions and they've been growing. And you can see the same thing in the options market. I think that at this point in time, you've had over the last few weeks some big bets that the euro would weaken. And if it just goes sideways, some of those people are likely to get bored of those positions. The news isn't worse. The most recent European economic data, French consumer confidence this morning, for example, isn't worse than expected because expectations are beaten into a pulp. So, you wouldn't. There's not much about the European economy that to make you like the euro, and just because it's cheap doesn't make you like it on its own. But if it goes sideways, the market is over-positioned to the short side. I mean, that's the contrast with sterling in my mind, where that's not true.
Hey, Kit, always great to catch up with you. Kit Jukes there, Societe Generale's chief FX strategist. The euro just a little bit negative on the day, Tom. Euro dollar positive, though, on the week.
Yeah, Floody, I mean, I have no trend here at 9:30 this morning. We're now, an hour and 15 minutes away from the opening, and I've got no trend anywhere. All I can say, and this is really important for waking up America, it's so much better a tape than it was 3.5 hours ago. It's dramatically improved from 4-ish, 5, that early morning London.
Well, I don't know
pricing.
how much confidence there is that this will be the case in a couple of hours' time, because we saw a big change in yesterday's session.
Huge swing.
And 49.06, we're going to get a 48 print again on oil here any moment. Right now with the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, Lisa, thank you very much. It was a wild night in Charleston, South Carolina, where 7 of the Democrats running for president met in their 10th debate. Fresh off a caucus victory in Nevada, Bernie Sanders found himself defending his voting record in the U.S. Senate. At last night's debate, sponsored by CBS and aired on Bloomberg, Sanders acknowledged supporting legislation that favored gun manufacturers.
Well, Joe has voted for terrible trade agreements. No. Joe voted for the war in Iraq. My point was not to be... I have cast thousands of votes, including bad votes. That was a bad vote.
As we've been reporting, President Donald Trump tweeted this morning that he will be having a news conference at the White House on the coronavirus at 6 p.m. A growing list of countries have cases of the coronavirus, which has sickened about 81,000 people around the globe. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says a vaccine would help stop the spread from becoming a pandemic, but creating one will take time.
We're close to starting a phase 1 trial to determine safety. We're going to do that in about 1.5 to 2 months. But that doesn't mean you have a vaccine. In order to get a vaccine that's practically deployable for people to use, it's going to be at least a year to a year and a half at best.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John
Michael Barr, sir, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Your equity market following a 4-day rout on the S&P 500, positive by a single point. From New York this morning, good morning. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
Years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's Change.
Influential conversations from...
The thing that I would say to anybody that was thinking about a job in social care is go for it. I'm Georgia. I love social care because you never know what each day will bring. It's emotional sometimes, highs and lows, but no 2 days are the same. I love the work, yeah. It makes me feel really good as a person. We make people smile every day.
If you want to make a difference to your life, care for someone else's, visit everydaysdifferent.com to find jobs in adult social care.
Discover Ireland's Wild Atlantic Way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
What am I saving for? My passion. Food photography.
I trained to be a landscape garden designer.
Open a food store and sell my famous fish tacos.
I go to stuntman school.
I'd be a wedding planner.
I'd start a dog grooming business. Sorry, we'd start a dog grooming business.
What are you waiting for? Make your one day happen with a Fidelity Stocks and Shares ISA. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules may change. Full terms for our Stocks and Shares ISA are available on our website, 18 plus UK residents.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 8:17 on Wall Street, and futures this morning are a little change. We go to the first word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. U.S. futures remain choppy right now. Dow futures down 11 points. We're down 425 early on. S&P futures higher by 2.5, and NASDAQ futures climb by 11. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.36%. Gold is up 9. Oil is below 50, and Shanghai fell 0.8% overnight. Well, European markets are now trading mixed this morning. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, new home sales. And after the bell last night, Disney named the parks chief to succeed Iger as the CEO, and Salesforce boosted its 2021 revenue forecast. Regarding earnings this morning, Lowe's quarterly sales missed estimate. Shares are a little changed in the pre-market. And wrapping things up, Nike was cut to hold over at HSBC, and Toll Brothers cut to market reform over at Raymond James. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news of your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate it. What we're going to do right now is get away from econ babble and all the talk about the markets and actually talk about the operations and the exposures that people have. He is Randy Frederick, and he's the guy at Schwab that you never hear about, that you should hear about, which is the operational movements of the market. He's expert in, like, when somebody trots out in a suit and tie, the put-call ratio. He's got a tattoo to his brain, and we're thrilled that Randy Frederick joins us now with the Schwab Center for Financial Research. Here's the reality. 1987, oops, it was those guys like Randy Frederick. 1998, oops, leverage. It was those guys like Randy Frederick. What do you worry about now in the operations? Is it ETF exposures? What's the thing in the mechanism that we're doing in investment that you have on the radar?
I'm not that worried about ETF exposure. I mean, ETFs in some sense, I think, are just a mutual fund of the 21st century, really, in many ways. They're an improvement on mutual funds.
And you don't parse between tangible and intangible investments like a gold ETF or a palladium ETF versus a treasury 5-year duration ETF?
Yeah, so let me clarify that.
Please.
ETFs that are indexed, that are one times directly correlated, I don't worry about. I worry a lot about inverse correlated ETFs. I especially worry about leveraged ETFs, 2 times, 3 times, things like that.
So when I'm in the triple leveraged all cash fund and I make a decision a week ago, because, now I'm in the fourple leveraged all cash fund, you're worried about me, right?
I'm worried about that because most people like that don't realize that thing's designed to only move that much that day, and that the next day it all resets. In the end, those things all dwindle to zero ultimately.
I think he worries about.
Excuse me.
He worries about.
Squeeze me.
He worries about short vol products and the like, I'm sure.
Well, not just short vol, but I mean anyone that's inverse correlated. I mean, if you think about it, I always tell people this is the mathematics that you learned in middle school. If you go up 10% and then you go down for 10%, you're down. And then if you go down 10% and you go up 10%, you're down also. So in the end, they just dwindle. They have to.
Yeah, I did that with Afterthought the other day.
How did that work out for you?
She's enjoying the quality C-.
You're doing the homework for the youngest?
Yeah, she got a C-.
Randy, many of our listeners, our audience, want to try and understand whether we've seen a big washout, whether we've flushed out sentiment enough. And I know for guys like you have a dashboard, certain indicators that you would look at to get a better gauge of that. Walk us through that at the moment.
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's important to point out what you're trying to accomplish. So, for example, we believe everyone should be a long-term investor, but among those, there are people who like to carve out a portion for shorter-term trading. Those are the people that I mostly speak to. So it's usually maybe 20% of your portfolio or less. If you're willing to take some risk, we're likely to see a big update here in a matter of just a few days. And the reason for that is that historically...
Sure, to put a time and place on that?
Yeah, historically, I can't tell you exactly when it will happen, but historically, some of your largest updates come during some of your biggest routes. So, for example, go back to late 2008, go back to early 2009. You will see enormous updates during those periods of time, but it's also terribly unsettling because of volatility. Volatility, I always remind people, means big moves in both directions. And in fact, when I put out the summary of my weekly commentary, which I put out last week Friday, what I said was, with earnings season about over and a lack of other catalysts, the coronavirus is likely to take center stage next week, and that likely means higher volatility and big moves in both directions. So far, all of those things have been true, but we've only had big moves in the down direction. Well, volatility is not directional.
Let's put an actual number on it. The S&P has had 4 straight down sessions through yesterday, and that is the first time since at least 1927 that the index fell so fast in the days after hitting a record. When you talk about the nodes of contagion or the nodes of concern, how much is just the complacency, the herd mentality that's being built into markets, the biggest concern for you?
Well, it's definitely a problem. It was a much bigger concern a week ago. And in fact, I've been putting out most of my commentary since the very first announcement of the coronavirus, which was on January 22nd, that we first found out about it. From that point forward, I've been warning about things like excessive volumes in the options markets, primarily in equity options. Very, very, very low put-call ratios. In other words, people being very, very bullish, very long, and without any regard to the potential for a downside move. And those are the types of things that I start warning about, because historically we have seen those things happen before we get big down moves. Now, maybe this one's bigger than we've seen in the past, but you have to keep in mind that this is a black swan event, and people are completely unprepared for those things.
You're willing to call this a black swan event. That tells me that the risk is in the hedging out there now. If somebody has a trade in and they're hedging against it, that's where we always get in trouble. What's the hedge right now that you're worried about?
Well, the challenge is you can't hedge a black swan event. You simply can't. Here's the thing. The majority of the things that move markets are on a calendar. The vast majority of them. It's a Fed meeting. It's an earnings report. It's an election. Whatever. We may not know the outcome, but we know this is what, I hate to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but Donald Rumsfeld said there were 2 types of unknowns, known unknowns and unknown unknowns. The unknown unknowns are the black swan events. They come completely out of nowhere. You don't know where they will hit, how they'll hit, what impact they'll have. The coronavirus is one of those things.
So when you have high tea with Liz Ann Saunders, are you telling her, because of the trading dynamics you see, that everybody should lighten up, or is it be ready for the opportunity to get in?
Well, right at the moment, the best thing to do is to not do anything just yet. And the reason I say that is that historically, again, no one knows exactly how long or how deep the impact of this virus is going to be. But what we do know is historically, if you are looking for an opportunity to bottom fish or to look for a bargain, I always send out messages, and I did this, in fact, just yesterday again, that wait till you get a couple of good solid up days. We haven't had that yet. If you go back to when the market first pulled back 3.5% a month ago, the people who bought on the very first day, and there were many who did it, got hurt for the next week until we had 2 solid up days. At that point, we rose for the next 2 solid weeks. Now that we've had a much bigger route, same thing here holds, is that you're going to get a big update here at some point, but wait till you get a second good update. You're not going to bottom, but you'll reduce your risk much more so than if you're ready to step in now.
Randy, thank you so much.
Thanks, Randy.
Frederick with the Schwab Center for Financial Research. John, I can't say enough about how in the econobabble and all the 60,000 feet stuff, we lose sight of the risks that can be there when the moment happens of a bigger down.
Some great conversations coming up through the next couple of hours. I reached out to Nouriel a couple of days ago. Mr. Rabini, he's going to join us next hour.
He will join us here. He had an important essay out a few days ago. Futures advance. Up 14, Dow futures up 96. Worldwide, this is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
The thing that I would say to anybody that was thinking about a job in social care is go for it. I'm Georgia. I love social care because you never know what each day will bring. It's emotional sometimes, highs and lows, but no 2 days are the same. I love the work, yeah. It makes me feel really good as a person. We make people smile every day.
If you want to make a difference to your life, care for someone else's, visit everydaysdifferent.com to find jobs in adult social care.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We are live on Bloomberg Radio, 1 hour away from the opening bell. A little bit of a lift on equity futures, up 11 points on the S&P 500, positive 0.4% in the bond market. Yields up 2 basis points on a 30-year, up a single basis point on a 10-year. Your yield on a 10-year Treasury, 136, rounded up, call it 137. At the front end of the curve, your 2-year yield now almost unchanged on the session, 120 on twos.
Yeah, it's a real nice shift here, John. It's definitely an upfield, and a different upfield than the few tries we've had earlier today. This is some of it coming into the market opening of 9:30, but it's a much better tape. I still have to watch oil 49.15. Yeah, it's off the bottom, but I don't want to oversell that. Oil is still more than challenged. Look at the dollar strength in DXY. Even there's some dollar strength, and dollar yen 110.47 as well. He is with Aberdeen Standard. James McCann has done a lot of very good economics over the year out of LSE and working on a broader American view and also a global view for Aberdeen Standard. James, what have you written in the last week in terms of the changing of institutional allocation? Have you made changes, or is it steady as it goes?
Well, I think at the moment we have to remain relatively steady and just try and cut some of the noise from the signal. I think there was always a concern that perhaps too much good news around the coronavirus crisis had perhaps come into the price. So I don't think we were perhaps overreacting to that previously. But now I think ourselves and the market, I think the key is just trying to understand how bad this outbreak tends to be, how widespread it is, and most importantly, I guess, how the economy evolves after this starts to come under control.
You do a lot of long, ancient money at Aberdeen Standard. When you see the yield structure that John Farrell's going to quiz you on, do you, by definition, lower your actuarial assumption? Is that the secret for 2021? We come ever lower down on that return that we're gaming into the future?
Well, I think the drop in the interest rate structure does feel structural, and when we think about some of our longer term forecast horizons and our longer term asset returns, we do have to bake that into the price. I mean, perhaps the recent dips over the last week or so might be a little bit more of a tactical opportunity if things don't all fall apart. But more generally, this decline in the interest rate structure we've seen over now a number of years does seem to be permanent, and so we have to think about different ways to generate strong and sustainable returns for our clients, not from perhaps some of those more traditional yields.
The worry at this point, James, I think for a lot of people, even if they maintain a constructive outlook about the back half of this year, is something that George Soros always used to talk about, going back to Karl Popper, that markets can shape the events they anticipate. Markets can shape the events they participate. Is that a worry? They anticipate, rather. James, is that a worry that you have right now?
It is, and because I guess what we're seeing at the moment is a shock to global financial conditions. As I mentioned earlier, maybe there's been a little bit of complacency built into this, but the real, significant decline in equity markets, the widening in credit spreads, the reaction in vol, I think we are seeing, at least in the very short term, global financial conditions tighten. And if that's something that persists and perhaps comes even worse, then that does have real macroeconomic effects, and they're well documented. So, the fear would be that it's not just the impact on the ground, but it's the broader spillover effect through global financial markets and the effect they have on real activity that could start to play out more and more. And I think, if that's the case, it's not necessarily our base case at the moment, but if that's the case, a lot of weight goes on the central banking community to try and push back that and ease a little bit more on the monetary side.
James, before we go to the Fed policy and the BOJ and BOK, I'm curious about this dissonance in the market where back last year everyone was worried about trade tensions potentially slowing growth. Now we have a situation that perhaps is transitory, but still more than 1/4 of businesses which are facing the coronavirus in Asia say they're setting up or using supply chains that reduce their reliance on China. Why is this not a commensurate type of concern for global growth as the trade tensions last year?
Well, I guess the expectation is that it's almost like a temporary supply shock. So it's certainly something that's very, very significant, important. It's something that's caused us to write down our global growth forecast quite materially for this year already, and that could fall even further. But I guess the difference from last year is that felt like a real structural change in the global trade environment, as politics really, really viewed trade as a political weapon, as a tool to mobilize. The fear is that businesses that rely on supply chains can't do so to the same extent because they might face tariffs or they might face different types of regulation in the future. So I think that really threw up some structural challenges over the course of 2019 about businesses who've built their model on taking advantage of these supply chains. I guess at the moment, absolutely it's the case that countries with supply chains, companies with supply chains to China are certainly feeling the pressure because of those really acute disruptions. But if this virus starts to come under control over Q2, if there are signs that some of the measures put in place to try and control it are able to be eased through the second half of the year, then those supply chain disruptions should ease. So, I think it's absolutely true that both are having acute and severe impact on supply chains, but I think the nature of them is a little different.
What is Aberdeen Standard's approach to commodity deflation? It's been evident, and now it's ever more evident. Every chart shows it. I featured one, folks, out on Twitter and LinkedIn this morning. But how do you view investment in commodity-structured companies?
Well, I think it's hard really as well to get away from the U.S. political environment from that standpoint, and whether we're going to get a new candidate coming in on the Democrat side who puts significant barriers up to investment in shale technology. I think if we look over the last 10 years, that's been really economically important, that's been a source of investment that's been able to yield very significant returns and really change the dynamics of the global oil and energy market. So I think that's something